A typical UN resolution begins with what are called the preambular paragraphs. And the preambular paragraphs spell out the legal framework for resolving this conflict.
Where the fuck was this guy at in our debate? Well, this guy seems like he seems...
Agendas directed at American society. And in the United States, the dark-hued Arab raping a virginal white woman has a deep historical resonance. So it was going to play well here. The second reason, and I probably get criticized for this, is because of the woke culture. And that's what I think happened with the UN investigations, what happened with the Human Rights Watch investigation, what happened with the Amnesty.
When they're investigating Israel and they see crimes from the Palestinians, it's because they've gone super woke. But when they see Israel's doing crimes, they're being objective and fair. True.
So that's actually really interesting. I agree with you 100% on this. My attitude on this has been part hubris and part, at most, it would be a couple people that get slaughtered as a sacrificial lamb to enact a much larger campaign of death and destruction. And this will be the cause belli. But of course,
I like how he says, I agree with you, but then he just explains exactly why. No, he doesn't agree with you. Hasan does believe that there was some kind of conspiracy theory here because why not? Because it's Jews. But that's cute. Fucking cow. Hasan is having Finkeldick on stream. What are the chances you want to ask about the debate with you? You understand how crazy it is that Finkelstein didn't catch any heat? Like, how biased the people are in terms of if you're on their team? Were you with us? Oh my God.
I wasn't here for the whole
Wait,
Israel-Palestine.
you weren't here for that.
No, I missed it all.
No, Moot. Israel-Palestine. Oh!
Yeah, I'm just learning.
Oh,
Wait, what?
No!
What happened?
Who's talking about Israel-Palestine? Oh, my God.
Mr. Borelli! I mean, I've seen the memes, but...
No. Why did you say that? You have not seen the memes, Mooten. You don't know the memes.
No, we need to do a whole nother arc, man.
You don't know the memes, Mooten.
You can't handle the memes.
Listen to me, okay? Okay. Finkelstein sued some neighbors because they were too loud. He claimed that they were up all night making insane noise or whatever.
So, that's suable?
Yeah, I guess you can, yeah.
Okay, he sued him.
So he
Then
had a
what?
whole complaint, all right, where he sued them for, and the complaint that he writes is hilarious. He obviously wrote this, or his lawyer took a lot of dictation from him. Here, I'm going to send you this. I just want you to read through some of this, because I don't think people are aware. So he sued these people, and it seemed fine. Okay, I guess they were being a nuisance. Read this for us, all right?
Defendants. Carl Jovalanos and Robert Jovalanos, through their undersigned counsel, Rosales del Rosaria, answering the complaint of plaintiff, respectfully alleges the following upon information and belief. 1. Defendants specifically deny paragraph 11, 12, bunch of them. Defendants specifically deny the following paragraphs for lack of knowledge sufficient to form a belief as their truth, a bunch of them. Defendants admit paragraph 19 only to the extent that defendant Carl Javalos and plaintiff Norman Finkelstein were in an elevator at the subject building in the summer of 2015.
Carol.
But deny the rest of the allegations. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Carol. The truth being the contrary as set forth below. As for the statement of fact, the present action has been commenced in bad faith and is patently meritless in both law and fact. Defendants Carol and Roberto are a married couple. They are both migrants to the U.S. On or about the 2012 to 2016, they resided at an address. Defendants were, and still are, hardworking professionals. During the time they resided in their above-mentioned apartment... What?
Mooten.
Yeah?
You're not ready for this, okay? I just need you to understand that you're not ready for this. Go ahead, continue.
All right.
You're not ready. You think you are, you're going to read a little bit, you're like, wow. No, you're not. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. During the time they resided in their above-mentioned apartment in Brooklyn, they were usually at work and away from their home on weekdays. On weekends, they were also often out of the house. Out of common decency and respect for their neighbors, defendants did not bother their neighbors by making any noise from their apartment, and they did their best to avoid and/or minimize any kind of noise. Occasionally, however, noise and vibrations from the apartment above them would be heard and felt in the defendant's apartment, which may have been the cause of the plaintiff's complaints. On or about the summer of 2015, plaintiff Norman Finkelstein, apparently claiming that the defendants were intentionally making noise in their apartment purposefully to annoy plaintiffs, started a campaign of harassment and intimidation against the defendants in order to drive them out of their apartment. Plaintiff made false and malicious reports against defendants to the CPS, seeking to have the defendant's daughter, about 2 years old, taken away from the defendants. On or about August 14th, 2015, defendants received a letter from CPS that a report had been filed against them for suspected child abuse or maltreatment. But the CPS dismissed the complaint and advised the defendants in the letter, Exhibit B, that the complaints against them were unfounded. Plaintiff also made false reports to the police and immigration authorities against the defendants without just cause other than to harass the defendants. On or about August 15th, 2015, plaintiffs and defendant Carol were in elevator at the subject's apartment building. Plaintiff suddenly confronted defendant Carol, yelling, "Your husband is a drug addict. I am a professor. I am a doctor. I will do everything for them to take away your daughter."
Stop.
This is
quick break. Quick pause. Okay. So
Okay.
you know Dershowitz?
No. not
From
the
everything
movie.
I've seen of him, he might have been decent at one point, but legitimately like a subhuman, gross, weird Jewish guy that appears on Fox News and justify any horrible thing a Republican does. This guy will justify. Okay, but a long time ago, one of the big dramas that people spoke about was that Finkelstein unfairly had his tenure denied at a university because other professors essentially his claim was that other professors essentially had like a grudge against him, saying that he was like unprofessional. They made shit up really because he was like a Jew who was like being critical of Israel. But then after my personal experience with him, and then now after like, just reading this complaint, I definitely understand. He is a crazy person, okay? He is fucking insane. Also,
He's just a lunatic.
yeah, hold on real quick. Did you watch the debate I had with him or part of it, or?
I've seen a meme from it of him just being like, "Mr. Borelli, Mr.
Yeah,
Borelli." That's it.
Wait, you saw him mispronounce my name a ton, right?
Yeah, 1,000 times, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, do you know why or whatever? So, I'm so glad that he left this in. That was a meme. He was memeing. Are you watching? So, when Lex Friedman takes a break here.
We need a smoke break. We need a water break. We need a bathroom
Take
break.
down Gaza is not a genocide.
So, they take a break, so they assume the cameras are off and everything, right?
Russia is a genocidal
What does
statement.
take down Gaza
We went to war with Iraq. We wanted to destroy Iraq. That was a
Take down
genocidal
Gaza.
statement. There's a reason why genocide is such an importantly guarded concept, and it's not to
Listen, are you listening?
Yep.
He thinks the cameras are off, okay?
condemn every nation that goes to war.
Mr. Bennell,
Wait, you do know how to pronounce my...
He knows my name. He just thought the
Mr. Bennell.
Yeah. It's so fucking annoying. Nobody watches this debate, okay? They got crushed. They knew nothing. It was ridiculous how insane both of these people were. But even the calling me Mr. Borelli, it's not because he was forgetting my name. It was just a meme to him the entire fucking time. And when the camera was off, the first time he addressed me, Mr. Bennell, he knows it exactly. And it's just like, anyway, all right, keep going.
Keep reading. I'm gonna take your daughter away. Okay. Refusing to be bullied, defendant tried to defend herself and her family and told the plaintiff that he is not the only professional in the building.
Now, hold on.
After
Keep this in mind as well. Remember, okay? It's a complaint. You can write whatever you want in a complaint, and you can write whatever you want in a response to a complaint. It's civil lawsuit. Who the fuck? You write whatever you want. There's not necessarily anything proving it.
We see that. They call
yeah.
you a pedophile in your lawsuit all the time.
Unless, maybe, these people include exhibits, but keep going.
Okay. After the aforesaid incident, plaintiff committed more intimidating and hateful actions against the defendants. On several occasions, these incidents compelled the defendant to contact the police. On or about August 2015, plaintiff struck defendant's apartment door with heavy blows from a heavy object. Attached is a picture of the damage to the defendant's door as a result of the blows, Exhibit C.
Okay,
You wanna
wait.
Pull that up.
Let's scroll down a little. Okay, I'll open two of these. So Exhibit A and B, we see like the letter from social
Yeah, those are
services,
complaints.
from Child
Yep.
Protective Services, by the way. This is the
deal,
picture
by
that
the
they
way.
provided for Exhibit C.
Oh my God. They hit him with a pipe.
Okay.
Jesus. And that's a metal door.
Well, no. Or it's something, or it's like thin, whatever. But yeah, okay, keep going.
Plaintiff would also strike the walls and ceilings of his own apartment, which would rattle and terrify the defendant's families upstairs. This is just a nice family, man. Plaintiff would engage in unprompted harassing conduct with defendants. At one point, plaintiff went up to the defendant's apartment and rang the buzzer and refused to let go.
Moot!
This act...
I just need you to, you're still not ready. We are not even all the way through. You're not ready. Maybe we're halfway through the crazy shit. Keep going.
Okay.
Maybe.
This act caused the defendants, and especially their baby daughter, to hide in fear. Plaintiff would also fasten menacing, outrageous, and defamatory letters containing prejudice, hateful, and abusive language upon the front door of the defendant's apartment in full view of the other people in the building. In one of the letters, Exhibit D, which plaintiff posted outside the defendant's door on or about June 14th, 2016, so it's been going on for about a year now, plaintiff told defendants to rent a gorilla cage in the Bronx Zoo, and plaintiff will happily supply them fresh bananas. What? Plaintiff wrote, if you stomp and bang on
Exhibit
your
D.
bedroom
Just
floor,
go to Exhibit D. He would print these out and attach them to the door upstairs. Okay.
if you stomp and bang on your bedroom floor in the morning between 6:30 and 8:30 a.m., I will bang on your door and on my bedroom ceiling between 3:30 and 5 a.m. in the morning. If I don't sleep, you don't sleep. If you can't control yourself, you can rent the gorilla cage in the Bronx Zoo. I will happily supply fresh bananas. Okay. In another letter, Exhibit E, which was posted outside of the defendant's door on or about June 21st, plaintiff warned and threatened the defendant. Starting at 3:30 a.m., you will not be sleeping tonight. Subsequently, in another letter, Exhibit F, which was posted outside the defendant's door on June 22nd, plaintiff mocked and denigrated the defendant and called them apes. Too bad, apes. You're not sleeping tonight. Okay.
Okay, I think you're at the halfway point of crazy shit now.
Yeah.
Keep going. We're not done yet.
Even before the above-mentioned letters in June, plaintiff had posted other defamatory letters outside the defendant's apartment door in full view of other people in the building. On or about August 2015, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit G, stating that the police had knocked on their door again and the defendants refused to open the door, and that 2 times Roberto threatened to kill me. That Carol was involved in Medicare/Medicaid fraud. We got to get Nick Shirley here. And impersonated a doctor. The defendants stopped threatening my life. On or about August 21st, 2015, plaintiff posted
So as a heads up, I don't know if we got
H.
this in the response, if it was listed at the front. I believe he's a doctor, in case you didn't know.
Finkelstein is a doctor.
No, not Finkelstein. The defendants, one of the defendants, I believe, is a doctor or works at a doctor's office.
Roberto is a doctor or works at a doctor's office.
Yes.
On or about August 21st, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit H, stating that Carol had a former job at the fake medical office next door, run by the Russian mafioso doctor, that he would call the police and tell them about Carol's past, that he had warned them about the illicit activity that the defendants carry on like animals. Okay, for my knowledge, what color are these people?
Oh, hold on. You're asking me what color Carol and Roberto Oveanos are? You're asking me that? My guess is
making
brown.
sure.
I'm just going to go ahead and guess there.
I would assume brown as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
that Roberto Oveanos is probably brown, would be my guess. I could be wrong there, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see color, so.
Same.
On or about August 2015, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit I, stating that illicit activity is taking place in the defendant's apartment and plaintiff will report them to CPS and the police. On or about August 20th, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit J, stating that if you don't stop the noise, plaintiff will call the police. The defendants will end up either deported, arrested, or without your child. I just want to say, whoever sold these motherfuckers the apartment, I guarantee that they
knew.
got it like a bandit, dude. They knew.
These guys are coming in. It's like, oh, apartment, very cheapo. Yeah, and the guy's like,
Yes,
yeah,
apartamento.
cheapo, mucho gusto. Good luck, you. Bye.
On August 21st, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit L, stating that Medicaid/Medicare fraud is a criminal offense, that impersonating a physician is a criminal offense. Tell Dr. Al Sayed. On or about August 22nd, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit M, stating that they have 8 days to move out, and if you are still here on September 1st, someone is going to jail. That's crazy. August 22nd, Exhibit N, stating that if the noise continues...
Are you going through any of these exhibits? Exhibit G? We had that one.
I'm waiting for you to scroll to them, yeah.
There. We have
that's
our
nice.
norm letter there. 2 officers from the 61st precinct knocked on your door this morning, and again in the evening. I told them that you were inside and refused to open the door. So he's walking over to the apartment as the officers are knocking in to tell them, oh no, they're in there, officers. Keep knocking. If anything happens to me, you will end up in jail. You better stop the noise and stop threatening my life. I was advised by the officers to call 911 every time the noise starts or you threaten my life. The officer said that sooner or later you will not be able to hide anymore. Exhibit H. You committed the biggest mistake of your life yesterday. I had 2 guests in my apartment, one of them a professor of criminology. They listened to the noise for 4 hours. At midnight, we all went together to the police precinct where we all spoke to several police officers. The police are now fully informed about the situation. They urged me to call 911. The moment the noise starts again, I also contacted Child Protective Services again. I already spoke to several of your friends in the elevator on the way to your party about you. I now know your places of employment, which I will contact this week. But here's your big problem. On Tuesday, August 18th, I will contact Immigration and Naturalization Services. I will inform them of young doctor Carol Oveanos' former job at the fake medical office next door, run by the Russian mafiosi fake doctor. I know exactly what was going on there. Faking a medical establishment in New York is a criminal offense and grounds for immediate deportation. Carol and Robert's papers and your babysitter's papers better be in order when INS pays a visit. You now have 2 days to quickly and quietly vacate the apartment. If you make any noise while moving, I will immediately contact the police again and tell them about Carol's past. I warned you in the last letter that I knew about the illicit activity. You chose to carry on like animals. You will now pay the price. I warned you that you will never win against me. You should have Googled my name, Norman Finkelstein, or gone to YouTube and entered my name. Now it's too late.
This guy's fucking nuts, man.
Also, I don't know if it should go without saying, but obviously zero evidence by Norm ever presented that I'm aware that this is like an illegal hospital or anything. Like, he literally is just like making shit up because he's trying to get these people to fucking leave. But
medical doctor stuff. On or about August 24th, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit P, stating that the defendants do not move. He will call the police and it's over. The 24th posted Exhibit Q, stating he's calling the police and telling them everything. The defendants had your chance. The defendants are now finished. August 27th, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit R, stating that the building where the defendants live underwent a rapid turnover and acceleration in demographics in recent years. Things began to change, decidedly for the worse, that the family living in 4A, Robert and Carol, began inflicting intolerable amounts of noise. The plaintiff had repeatedly talked to Robert, but he suffers from some mental impairments. Whether it is congenital or substance-induced, I cannot say. That Carol was involved in medical fraud. A copy of this letter was also hand-delivered to the building's management.
Exhibit R, hold on. Oh, we were only on J.
Exhibit R.
Here's J. These are crazy. Just...
The noise stopped for 3 days, so I didn't call Immigration and Naturalization Services, but now it is starting again. If you don't stop the noise, I am calling the police. But this will be the last call to the police. You will end up either deported, arrested, or without your child. You decide.
And then Exhibit K.
I'm giving you until the 31st of August to move out. If you are still in the apartment on September 1st, I will inform the NYPD of Carol's past. It seems that Carol has forgotten that I was one of the young doctor's patients. I was also a patient of the Russian mafioso doctor who had no medical equipment in the office. If you disturb me or the guests in my apartment between now
no
or
medical
August
equipment in the
31st,
office. That's how he knows it was a Russian mafioso thing, by the way, because he didn't see the right equipment, I guess. Yeah, but go ahead.
Shrimple. I will call the police and it will be over for all of you. You decide. I don't care if you buy 1,000 carpets. You must move out of the apartment by the August 31st.
Okay, get him out of here. Exhibit L.
Medicare, Medicaid fraud is a criminal offense. Impersonating a physician is a criminal offense. A babysitter who does not pay taxes is committing a criminal offense. You should keep this in mind next time you threaten to call the police. It will be your last time. I will tell them everything you have had. You better keep that child quiet. Okay, next. You have 8 days to move out. If you're still here on September 1st, someone is going to jail. That one is the craziest one. Medicare, Medicaid fraud is a criminal offense. Faking a medical establishment to commit medical fraud is a criminal offense. Do you want to go to jail?
Let me just say, for a brief moment in time, the homes are better than apartments people in my community were up bigly after this, okay? Go ahead.
You have 8 more days to move out. If you are not gone by September 1st, I will go to the police and tell them everything.
I love all like the arbitrary deadlines that he just like those. Like, you have 2 days, you have 8 days, you've got 5 days. Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid fraud, impersonating a doctor, fake medical office. You'll end up in jail for a very long time or deported. So get out of this building while you still have a chance. You had better tell the babysitter to keep the child quiet. If there's any noise on Monday, I will not ring the buzzer. I will not bang on the door. I will just call the police and it will be over for you. You decide. If you don't want to go to jail, you tell the babysitter to do her job. You have until noon. If there is a moving van in front of the building, I will wait until you move out. If not, I'm calling the police and it's over. That's the last bang. On Monday, August 23rd at noon, I am calling the police and telling them everything. If the babysitter does not have papers or is not paying taxes, you should warn her. You had your chance, but now you are finished. Oh my God.
Oh, you don't have to read all this, but so a memorandum of notice. This was Exhibit R. This was On or about August 27th, plaintiff posted a letter stating that the building where the defendants live underwent rapid turnover and alteration in demographic in recent years. By the way, demographic? So I think he posted this like somewhere like in the front of the building, like inside, like where maybe the mailboxes are. So basically everybody could see it. But okay, that's Exhibit R. You don't have to read it, but that's, just him complaining about his neighbors. Yeah.
On or about August 28th, plaintiff posted a letter, Exhibit S, stating that defendants should cease their intolerable conduct, that Carol was involved in Medicare/Medicaid scam that bilked both senior citizens and the federal government. The defendant's child is a victim of neglect. A copy of this letter was also hand-delivered to the building's management on or about October 2nd. So
wait, real
September
quick.
1st has come to pass. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and then one more quick thing, just related to that debate that we did.
I gotta say,
Waiting.
He always calls me a thing called destiny, okay? I don't know if you've ever heard him say that, but...
Sledgehammer to the porcelain vase to broader audience and enlighten them in the facts and just ignore the other people in the room.
He's talking
And
about
I'm
a debate.
thinking to myself, maybe you're going to do that for me, but I am taking my sledgehammer to the porcelain vase. I am going to smash it to smithereens. So every time Maureen got into a serious mode as he answered that thing called destiny, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, Maureen? You are taking this sack of shit seriously. That is not going to happen on my watch. Every statement of mine was prefaced by, you moron. I think, do you know what it means, Bree? I prefer Brianna. Do you know what it means when you spent 42 years?
So, like, he admits that, like, his whole goal for our debate was to just derail and, like, just scream and everything. And he was even fighting with Rabbani because Rabbani wanted to be a bit more serious. But it's just funny, like, he's on record saying this. You have him,
He
like...
was just here to meme,
yeah, and then you have him off camera. He says my real name immediately because he's memeing the whole time. But people will still insist that, like, oh, no, like, Finkelstein destroyed you in that debate. And I'm like, no, he just screamed like a retard the whole time. It's like, no, you're just coping. It's like, he literally says that his goal was to go and scream like a retard the whole time. But,
And then he did.
Yeah, and he did. Yeah.
Exhibit S.
Also,
stating
just
the
as you,
defendant-
so as a thing, so Norm is not a real historian or a real scholar, but he is like the most well-known and probably the most popular like Western pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, anti-Jew, actually, you know what? He's not anti-Semitic. There's a weird thing that goes on with his brain, but like an anti-Israel, anti-Zionist scholar in the West. So it's just, this is funny that this is like their guy. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
On or about October 2nd, 2015, plaintiff posted a copy of letter Exhibit T. Show Exhibit T.
So memorandum.
Oh, it's another memorandum.
Oh no, he sent this to management, I think. Yeah.
Please take notice that the banging and stomping from apartment 4A continues, unabated. This incessant racket has interfered with any right to the quiet enjoyment of my apartment. On some days, the ceiling shakes and the walls rattle to the point that I fear for my safety. If this intolerable situation is not cured within the next 10 days, I will commence legal action against M&R management and the occupants of apartment 4A. Roberto and quote-unquote Dr. Carol. Hand-delivered on October 2nd. Okay. Defendants asked an attorney to write a cease and desist letter to the plaintiff, but to no avail. Plaintiff did not stop harassing defendants. He merely responded to the cease and desist letters with copies of the letters Exhibit R and Exhibit S he had previously furnished to the management. On or about the night of June 22nd, 2016, while defendant Carol and her baby daughter were inside the apartment, Carol heard a very loud crashing noise on her apartment door. She was pregnant at the time and was very scared. Looking out of the peephole in terror, she saw the plaintiff outside of her apartment brandishing a knife and what appeared to be a gun. Carol called the police, who subsequently arrested the plaintiff. Faced with the series of events, the family had been wanting to leave the apartment to escape from the plaintiff. Defendants eventually moved to Staten Island on or about October 31st, 2016. Subsequently, the DA's office called the defendant and asked them if they wanted to continue their criminal complaint. Thinking that their nightmare with the plaintiff was finally over, the defendant advised the DA's office that they did not want to pursue the criminal complaint against the plaintiff. But when the criminal case was discontinued, the plaintiff filed this present action, which is frivolous and is unfounded in both law and fact. It is merely another act done by the plaintiff in his campaign of bullying and prejudice. It has been malicious, commenced to plague the defendants with the aggravation and lawsuit and force them to spend a lot of money of attorney's fees and litigation costs in defending themselves. As for the affirmative defense, defendants repeat and reallege the foregone statements by reference as if they are fully set forth hereunder. Plaintiff's complaint fails to state a cause of action.
Okay, that's it. Basically, that's all
Yeah,
the same as
that's
like.
pretty much. Now we're just getting into the legal bullshit. Jesus Christ! He comes with a knife and a gun.
Yeah, it's just fucking. It's just crazy. Like he is so eccentric. He's insane.
Maniac.
Yeah, but it's just funny that this is like their top guy.
This is
and
their
again,
guy.
I always say this as examples for like Hasan's behavior or any of my opponent's behavior. And that's why I get so fucking ass pained when people in my community are like, Destiny, though, you shouldn't have said this because of optics. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think you guys realize like how much shit these other people get away with just because nobody actually gives a fuck. Like, it's not about the fact of the matter of anything. Like, could you imagine if there was a complaint against me where I'm like calling CPS and the police and
Brandish
immigration?
A gun. They would just call you a murderer,
and
like an
immigration.
attempted murderer.
Yeah, just because somebody was making noise, and we don't even know if they're making noise. For people in chat that are talking about the noise thing too, now obviously I can't speak to it. Maybe these people were making an exorbitant amount of noise that warrants 400 fucking visits from the police that never amounted to anything. Maybe some apartments are really good at soundproofing. Like where I live now, I don't know how. I don't hear anybody, and clearly nobody hears me because I'm fucking screaming all hours of the day. Nobody cares. Some places are insanely sensitive.
Really
like I remember, I don't know if you guys remember me ever mentioning this, but when I lived in Glendale, I couldn't roll my chair on the floor. Like if I rolled and I'm not like rolling around like I'm on a fucking, scooter or whatever, just like in my apartment anywhere, if I would roll even a little bit, I would hear a bang on my ceiling from downstairs. So I guess it was really loud or something downstairs. Some places are just like that. So maybe their ceilings were really sensitive to noise or something. So every time the kid was walking, maybe they heard it, but I don't know. But Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Even then, even if there is noise, it's never an excuse to go to someone's door with a gun and a knife.
Yeah. Anyway, what are you going to do? Okay. Sorry. Back to our kings. I really want to watch Finkelstein on Hasan today, though, because he talks so slow that I think it's disrespectful. I think he needs he needs a translator or somebody to go with him. I don't think you should be able to talk that slowly and consider it to be respectful to the audience. It's intolerable. Oh, so I guess as a quick thing, because I forgot how much we've gone over or not. If you study history, when you're studying history, scholars of history, I've never seen an exception to this, and I've never had anybody email me otherwise, but generally scholars of history, you have to be fluent in the language of the place you're studying because you need to be able to go through original sources on your own.
Yeah, you gotta read the primary text.
Yeah. So Finkelstein has published some number of books, some of which are like the most popular books on Palestine and Israel in the West. But he can't speak Arabic or Hebrew, so he's not able to go through any of the original sourcing on his own, which is just like you could call him maybe a pop historian, I guess would be fair, but like an actual historian not being able to read the language of anything of the conflict or the history of the place he's studying is exceptionally rare that I've heard. I've never seen that be the case before, but.
It's like nearly disqualifying as a historian.
Yeah, basically, yeah. As a person currently getting a history degree, that's completely untrue. If you could give me an example of a well-cited historian on a particular topic that can't read the language, I'd be very interested in hearing about that. I'm sure you could get a degree or study history to some extent and not know the language, but I don't even know if that's true. But if you specialize in an area, even for philosophy, I feel like I've heard it said a lot that like if you're really going to learn moral philosophy, that like you should learn German. That's like a highly encouraging. That's just for philosophy. Couldn't you have trusted translators instead as a historian? Well, the problem is that one, any new material you come across, if any archive is made available or any new material comes out, you have to rely on another person to translate it, which is already iffy. And then the second issue is that there's no replacement for reading something in the original language. Like some languages, or maybe every language, there are just some things that when they're said in that language, things just carry like a slightly different connotation sometimes. And sometimes it's important to know the original language. And also it's your life. Like if this is going to be your job, you should learn the language. I mean, like you should know the language. How could you be so curious and so interested to dedicate your life to the study of a particular area and not learn the language? It doesn't make, I don't know, that's it. Yeah. But now if you're just talking about like a broad, like if you just get like an undergrad in history, and I'm not trying to minimize an undergrad in history, but if you're getting like an undergrad in history, you want to teach history or something else, that's different than being like a cited historian to be like a historian for a particular thing, country or history or whatever. Historians will tell you that you should learn the language for the field you're specialized in, but it's not absolutely necessary, especially for periods where the material is very small and people are really going over the same sources as others. I guess I'm talking about if you want to be a historian that's like writing history for those time periods. If you're just studying something, I guess it's like super ultra well studied, sure. I'm just not aware of any, and I've heard this repeated like a lot at this point. It was one of the biggest things that historians would bring up to me. Imagine if you were to open a book for US history and a person was trying to explain some time period, even if it's material that's been gone over by other people. Imagine you're reading this book and then you go back to the bibliography and there are like 12 sources for, this essay or paper you wrote, or you read, and every single source was like Chinese. As an American, intuitively, you would think like, wait, That's kind of weird. Really? I'm only talking about people that are trying to create new works in fields. If you're just writing a paper or something, maybe it doesn't matter as much. But and then also, hold on, am I about to ban this guy? Okay, yeah, you're getting a 7-day. Okay, hold on. And then I'll tell you why I'm banning you. Destiny, sometimes learning a language that was spoken by 50,000 people 2,000 years ago and is well covered by translators already isn't worth the hassle. Yes. I'm not telling you that you have to learn the Akabanuji language if you wanted to write an essay about the Akabanuji tribe in Antarctica or some shit. If you're going over World War II Germany, or if you're going over like French history and you can't speak or read French, it is super ultra sussy baka. I can't actually no, I stand even stronger on this opinion now. The idea that you would be trying to study the history of some country and you can't, any peripheral source, if something is referenced, now you have to contact a translator, you got to ask them to translate, you got to make sure the translate, like for every single thing you do, no, you got to know the language. I'm sorry, you have to know the language. You got to know the language. You have to. Maybe not a dead language or not a super micro language order, but for the big ones and the big historical things, you should. Fuck you.
So then you're even more mad at Finkelstein.
Well, I'm not mad at him. It's just people cite him as like an actual credible historian for Israel Palestine. He's really not. And if you actually go through his books, they're dog shit. I went through, it wasn't a whole one, I don't think, but I went through part of one at least. Was it the Holocaust Complex? Or was it might have been Gaza, like an inquest into its martyrdom or something. And my God, it's bad. His sourcing on everything is really, really, really bad. Holy shit. Basically, just like conspiratorial nonsense for almost everything. Like I remember there's a guy that he cites where he tries to argue that the Iron Dome. Also, if you read his books, you'll see that basically every single weird thing that's said about Israel Palestine, at least a year or two ago, now there might be new things, but every single weird thing originates from a Finkelstein book. So like the idea that the Iron Dome doesn't work and doesn't do anything, it was all a waste of money. It was him citing some.
That's a Finkelstein idea.
Yeah, it comes from a guy who Popular Mechanic, I think the word response. If somebody posted his name, like Picard or Pignard or something, if somebody has his name in chat, I would remember it. But like this guy like fakes some of the papers that he writes to show that like, oh, the Israeli Iron Dome doesn't work. And it doesn't matter anyway because Hamas doesn't fire real rockets anyway. He says they're the equivalent to like fireworks. Yeah, it's so stupid. His whole book is like so fucking crazy though, but whatever. Anyway. Oh, Theodore Postal. That's the guy I was thinking of, yes. Somebody said this. I don't know how true this is for everything, but I get a master's in art history, and I started on a PhD track. I had to have reading competency in French and German and pass a translation test to graduate. I don't know how normal that is, but something. Okay. My grandfather had a PhD in chemistry, and he had to learn French and German. That was in the early 60s, though. Well, that's because we were still learning chemistry from all the Nazis. Sorry.
I have been a huge fan of your work for many, many years. I really appreciate your resilience and your steadfast nature throughout all of the attacks that you've received throughout your career. You are someone who's very stubborn, and I see that same energy in myself as well. I try to be like that as well. And I think that's what's necessary to be able to breach this very sophisticated network of propaganda that has, for many, many decades, I think, deluded many Americans, many people in the Western world into believing that Israel is the most moral nation on earth. Israel is our most important ally, the only democracy in the Middle East. And I think, and I read your book, and I saw a sense of nihilism in there as well, given the horrifying nature of the circumstances with Israel's genocide on Gaza. But I really appreciate that you have continuously pushed to uncover the truth. You are, of course, one of the most important chroniclers of the Israeli apartheid, centering the victims, and also talking about the sophisticated propaganda network. I'm going to pull my questions really quickly, but I just wanted to give you that introduction first and foremost and explain to you that I will be a little bit nervous, so I apologize.
Well, there's no grounds to be discussing the facts, and you should be sober. I don't see any rational grounds for nervousness. I think one of the peculiarities of the Israel-Palestine conflict, as compared to, say, South Africa, is South Africa never tried to make an, so to speak, intellectual case in defense of its system, for the obvious reason that once the South African struggle, say, became a center of attention in the United States, it was impossible to defend it. We had just passed through the civil rights movement, the civil rights era, and there was no...
Fuck, I need to study South Africa. Is this true? Really? South Africans never gave an intellectual defense of apartheid? They literally just said, actually, we're evil racists?
Rational defense for the system of apartheid in South Africa. So apart from what you might call various organizations, in general, you didn't have to make a case. Whereas in the case of Israel, they had mobilized very sophisticated, abundant resources, but also sophisticated voices. And they made an intellectual case. And so long as they made it, it was compelling, it was convincing, because there really wasn't... Now remember, I'm an old-timer, so I'm talking about the 1970s, 1980s. There wasn't much of an organized intellectual resistance. What happened was, I wrote a book, I believe it was 2012, called Knowing Too Much, Why the American Jewish Romance with Israel is Coming to an End. And the thesis of the book was, more and more information was coming out about the nature of Israel and the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the information that was coming out primarily from human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, the Israeli Center for Human Rights in Occupied Territories. They were all liberal sources. It's not like you could dismiss Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International. You couldn't credibly dismiss them as anti-Semitic. You couldn't credibly dismiss them as right-wing. You couldn't credibly dismiss them as trucking in invidious Jewish stereotypes. In fact, a large portion of their staff were Jewish, including the executive director, say, in the case of Human Rights Watch, who was Kenneth Roth. So, and American Jews are overwhelmingly moderate to liberal in their political sensibilities. So there came a point of what you might call critical mass. You couldn't reconcile your political, ideological convictions with the facts that were coming out. And I predicted roughly around 2017, 2012 or 2017, I can't remember. No, it was 2017. No, it was 2012. I predicted that this American Jewish support for Israel was going to begin to go on the wane. And then came Gaza. And Gaza was kind of overload. You couldn't any longer strive as you may. You couldn't any longer. And so American Jews faced a crisis. And what I imagined would happen now, had reached critical mass with Gaza, and everything fell apart. Aside from the handful of fanatics and crazies, it was indefensible. And I think now, you can never say these things with certainty, because the news cycle passes. Maybe it could return to what it was before. Fancy word is the status quo ante. But I don't think so. I think it's pretty much over, the romance between American Jews and Israel. Because it's untenable. Jews are not right-wing by nature.
Yeah.
And they could not tolerate, they couldn't absorb or reconcile what was happening.
So we're gonna get into the book quickly, because I feel like there are a lot of historical analogs you utilize when comparing. You start off with October 7, and you immediately in the beginning of the book, you not only document the ways in which the Israeli government engaged in atrocity, but you actually hyper-focus instead on the Western media, the Western officials, the international institutions, and how they failed. You wrote the Gaza's Gravediggers with the explicit purpose of documenting the institutional corruption that supported the genocide of Palestinians rather than Israel's actions themselves, though. That was a deliberate effort. You open the book referencing the fifth labor of Hercules, in which he's ordered to clean out the Augean stables filled with animal poop. This metaphor extends to the entirety of the book. Can you explain the reference to both myself and the viewers, and why do you believe it's necessary to focus the story on the institutions that insulated?
God, I wish I knew who. I wish he was forced to say. I guess he would never have to be forced to say, but like, who's writing the interview questions for him?
And supported Israel rather than Israel itself?
I think that's a very good question. I did not back Biden. I had some passing remarks about Mr. Blinken, nothing substantive. I certainly didn't focus much attention on Mr. Netanyahu, on his cohorts, because the simple reason is, when I wrote several books on Gaza, the record was not known. It was sort of hidden away, collecting dust in human rights reports. Even the human rights organization, they do their research, but then they're supposed
Do you think
to
Hasan read the book?
Step.
No,
they're
of
supposed
course
to
not.
lobby on the basis of their research. The second step never came. The report simply collected dust. And so I wanted to preserve the historical record. And the purpose was because nobody had done that kind of work. I could say a large chunk of my life now sits on my bookshelves at home, with just not thousands, but tens of thousands of pages printed out of human rights reports. I wanted to document for history the record. That wasn't necessary with Gaza. Gaza now, everybody knows who wants to know. Everybody knows what's going on. And I felt to simply document the record again was a waste of time. The record is known, and also the perpetrators are known. They'll probably, in my generation, the slogan was, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Referring to Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president during the war in Vietnam. I think Genocide Joe is going to go down also.
Yeah.
That will be remembered. So all of that seemed superfluous to go through the record again. If I had great narrative powers, I would have done it. I don't know if you've read, I don't know if even your viewers will know. It was a wonderful, wonderful book written on the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. It's long forgotten now, but between 15 and 20,000 Palestinian and Lebanese were killed, overwhelmingly civilians. It was, up until Gaza, it was by far the biggest bloodletting. And there was a British historian, a British journalist, Robert Fisk. He wrote this book, Pity the Nation. It's really breathtaking. It's a breathtaking piece of narrative history. I don't have those narrative powers. I have good expository powers. I can sit down, analyze a document, and I can logically go through it, and I don't leave any wiggle room. You're cornered, you're trapped, it's case closed. So I didn't waste my time on the documenting the facts. What I did do was, I wanted to look at agencies, institutions from which you expect better. The International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, the UN Commissions of Inquiry, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and where you expect better, and to hold them accountable, not just the usual suspects, but also other people who, because of careerism, cupidity, cowardice, they sold their souls. Now, I want to be clear. The record was not terrible by the international institutions. It was not. We don't want a straw man. They were not. It was not terrible. The statements by the UN senior officials, like Philippe Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA, Gutierrez, a lot of it was quite good. And I acknowledge that. But there were other things that were terrible. Now, so far I've spoken in abstract.
We're gonna dial in on that for sure.
No, let me
yeah.
Okay,
We'll dial in on
that's coming later.
Yeah.
Then. So that was my, so to speak, my modus operandi.
Yeah.
When I wrote Gaza, an inquest into its martyrdom, nobody knew any of it. And it's a terrible story. I won't call it tragic, because the Greek term tragic means the fate was preordained. It's not preordained. This was systematic, methodical, and intentional.
Yeah.
But it's a horrible history, and I wrote to chronicle. This time, no, I wrote to indict. To hold these people accountable. And I still hope they will be held accountable.
Yeah.
There are certain officials who either should be censured or they should be ousted from office. And I named them very clearly.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that, but I do want to start with your prologue, because the book opens briefly with October 7, but it actually...
Prologue?
Because the book opens briefly with October 7, but it... Your prologue, because the book opens, and we're going to get to that, but I do want to start with your prologue, because the book opens
Based.
briefly with October 7, but it actually very quickly shifts into Nat Turner's 1831 slave revolt. And despite ordering...
Nat Turner's slave revolt. That one. I haven't heard that one by Finkelstein before. I wonder if he also talks about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I haven't heard that one before either. Oh my God. He has like the same 5 talking points he's like used for fucking 40 years. It's insane.
His followers to kill all white people. He's now revered as an American freedom fighter, which you also talk about. You ask, before he stands condemned, mustn't it be asked...
Nat Turner is revered as an American freedom fighter. Is he though? Really?
except to live and die in thraldom. What alternative did Nat Turner have? You also mentioned at the time, revered white abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison expressed horror over the events that took place, but blamed the white slave-owning population, saying, "We have warned our countrymen of the danger of persisting in their unrighteous conduct." I've also utilized the Nat Turner Rebellion example when referencing October 7. You have as well. I've seen your interactions on Piers Morgan, which is an interesting affair. We can talk about that later as well. But I wanted to hear, do you view yourself as a modern-day equivalent of the white abolitionist after writing about the Zionist suppression of Palestine for over 4 decades now? And obviously, you're probably a little too humble to answer that in a similar manner, but what other warnings have been ignored that you've been ringing the alarm bells on?
First of all, one has to acknowledge one's precursors, and one has to acknowledge one's current collaborators. There have been many people. It's still a small number, but there's still a number. My precursors were people like Noam Chomsky, Israel Shahak from the country Israel, Edward Said. They came before me, and in many ways, I learned from them both their steadfastness and also their mental powers, their dedication, their conscientiousness.
Do you think Finkelstein has done any objective research to even speak on this topic on Israel-Palestine? I mean, he's done a lot of research. I just feel like he engages in an ungodly amount of motivated reasoning. So, of course, everything's going to appear, one way to him.
I would say now I've entered the age where they're gone. They're not on the scene anymore. And so the mantle has, so to speak, with the baton has been passed to me. I don't believe I had any great powers of prediction.
I just
A lot
looked
of
at
my
the
analysis
facts.
since October 7th, I believe, has been borne out. But in general, those who predicted that if Israel continued with occupation, it was going to be a dramatic deterioration in Israeli society. A fellow, I suspect you've never heard of him, Yeshayahu Leibovich. And he was Israel's great philosopher. He had 4 PhDs. He's a smart guy. And he, along with a certain number of others, that as early as 1967,
Save some degrees for the rest of
It's
us.
going to be a complete disaster. That if you don't end it, Israel, he coined the phrase.
Did he do
by the way,
any
Yeshayahu.
original research, like a novel piece of information? No, he can't read. He can't read any of the source material. He can only speak English, so no, he can't do original research.
Yeshayahu Leibovich, who was the most revered intellectual. He coined the phrase, Israel is turning into a country of Judeo-Nazis.
People will say that term actually originated from David Duke sometimes.
No.
What's
David Duke
interesting-
is not bright enough to originate it.
So what's interesting on that point that you just mentioned is one of the examples that I often use is the horror in reaction to the Deir Yassin massacre from the likes of Albert Einstein, who...
Dave just checked, claimed his video was demonetized and everyone was chipping in because of his amazing content. It isn't. I checked. Are you the same guy who DMs me this stuff? Because there's a website that can check for video monetization and it says his video is still monetized. So I don't know if there's something glitched about that or if he's just fucking lying or...
He's gone back and forth and has a more complex, I think, experience with Zionism and what it turned into. But his commitment to binationalism and living alongside peacefully with the Jewish and the Palestinian population was very clear. And he is the example that I usually go to, which is really interesting because The Atlantic actually wrote a whole article on me deploying the Albert Einstein example, saying that this was actually wrong, that Albert Einstein was a huge Zionist and loves Israel, and I was lying about his background. Are you familiar with some of the things that Einstein has said about...
I've read his writings. I have to say I'm a bit of a skeptic about the possibilities of coexistence
get to that as well.
between the Jews and the indigenous Arab population, because there was such a sense of contempt for Arabs, Muslims, the indigenous population, and such a sense of a double kind of superiority by the Jewish settlers. There was the superiority of being European.
Yeah.
And then that was compounded, or you might say determined, by the sense of Jews feeling superior. That's the sense of superiority born of a certain notion of Jews being chosen people. And then there was just the sense of the backwardness of the Arab-Muslim community in general. So when you fill out the historical picture, the probability of a real coexistence among equals, I think, was not really very plausible. There were some individuals who weren't bad. The first head of the Hebrew University, a fellow named Judah Magnus, I think he was a pretty decent fellow so far as I can tell reading stuff. But I don't think it was really very possible. I think the most honest formulation came from now a right-wing Israeli historian. He wasn't always right-wing. Benny Morris.
Who you've had the pleasure of debating.
Yeah, he said that the idea of transfer is the euphemism for expulsion. He said the idea of transfer was inbuilt and inevitable in Zionism. I think that's a more honest reckoning of where things stood back then. So I'm not a believer that it was a real possibility of coexistence. Though it's certainly got much uglier in recent years. You could say the ugliness is either more honesty or, the expression that hypocrisy is the complement that vice plays the virtue. The older generation, they weren't so in your face. You mentioned Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin, he would be considered now the far left of Israel.
Yeah.
He would. But during his first term of office, he was elected in 1977. Well, you know what one of his first acts was? He abolished torture. Israel was practicing torture against Palestinian detainees from right after the 1967 war. Now this guy, Begin was...
Too woke for Israel now.
Exactly. Begin was a lawyer by training, and he was a stickler about the law. And he knew torture was illegal. So he did abolish it. I mean, nowadays, you couldn't even imagine that. It's not even conceivable.
Nowadays, the only time that Israel ever prosecutes any war criminals in their ranks is when they intercept communications of ICC prosecutors in an effort to utilize the complementarity principle against the ICC to act as though they're doing a mock trial, basically, to hopefully stop the ICC from further prosecuting their war crimes, which, again, we'll talk about. I wanted to continue in the epilogue.
I want to just return to the Nat Turner
Not the epilogue.
analogy.
Oh.
This is a matter of background. When October 7th first happened, the first couple of days, I don't know if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
Right, the first couple of days, it just looked like a prison breakout.
Yeah.
And they said about 50 people were...
So all cross-cultural research is invalidated just because you can't read the original text? What's your point? What? No, somebody asked if he's done any original research or contributed anything original to the historical conversation or whatever, and the answer is no, he can't. I mean, you can still write books on things. I'd be like...
Killed. And, people, that's not even the blink of an eye. So I immediately made my sentiments known that I supported...
I also remember that.
...the prison breakout. And I had no qualms about it, compunction. And it became clear that something much bigger happened. Something that much bigger happened. It was hard to try to think it through, to figure out, well, where do I stand? Probably in the order of 1,200 people were killed. I would say it's evidence is pretty clear. About 850 were civilians.
Yeah.
And of those 850 civilians, as of now, readily available material, overwhelmingly were killed by Palestinian militants.
Yeah.
That's a large number. You can't get around that. That's a large number. When sovereign should...
This is one of the things I wanted to push on the debate, and it triggered me so much, and I got to ask the question, but we didn't get much into it, is, in my mind, Finkelstein is like President Sunday. Like, he is crazy, and he has like his beliefs for whatever fucking reason he does, but he believes the things that he does on his own. Like, I think there's a whole bunch of this weird anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, anti-whatever shit that has kind of like hitched itself on the back of a lot of Finkelstein's writings. But I don't think that that's Finkelstein's main motivation. And I don't think Finkelstein tries hard to simp for other groups, because there are certain talking points, like what he just said right there, that the overwhelming majority of Jews on October 7th were killed by Hamas, by Palestinian militants. That is a position that Hasan wouldn't agree with. He wouldn't say it. Now, he's never going to correct him on anything in this conversation, obviously. But he's also very honest about like the anti-BDS stuff, where Finkelstein will say like it's pretty obvious you're just trying to say fuck you Israel or fuck you Jews or whatever in this stuff. Like he doesn't have all the quote unquote talking points. He just has his perspective, which is kind of crazy. But it's not because he's trying to simp for some other movement or group, which is interesting, I think.
Hila happened in 1982, the massacre in Lebanon. The initial numbers that came out, they turned out to be low. The initial numbers that came out were about 800 Palestinians were slaughtered in sovereign Shatila. In fact, it was probably closer to 2,000. But even when 800 came out, that was considered a very large number.
Yeah.
And then if you're from Egypt, when Sisi came to power, he committed the massacre at Rabbah Square with the nonviolent protesters. And the estimate by Human Rights Watch, about 1,000 were killed. And that was seen as it was the largest single massacre in Egyptian history. So that seemed a large number.
Yeah.
And now I'm faced with about 850 civilians killed on October 7th. And what do you do with it? What do you do with it? Now, under normal circumstances, mainly for the last 40 years, I don't say this with pride, I'm just saying it factually, I normally would have consulted Professor Chomsky. I considered his moral judgment, if not impeccable, near impeccable, and I usually deferred to his moral judgment. But he wasn't available. And I was sweating for around a week, because I knew a lot of people were going to want to know what I think. And I was torn. I was torn between the fact that I knew, from having spent about the last 20 years, I knew what had been done to the people of Gaza. I knew the details, the horror of what those folks endured. On the other hand, there was a mass slaughter. And what do you do with it? And I thought. I walked the streets trying to figure this out. And it happened that the last book I had written was on wokeness, and I had read a lot about the abolitionists. And I had read, of course, about Nat Turner. So I turned to Nat Turner, The Rebellion. I said, you know what? Roughly, it's about the same thing. What the slaves endured was not much different. Gaza from 1948, when it was under Egyptian rule, from 1948, it was repeatedly described as a concentration camp by outside visitors. Even the extreme right wing, head of Israel's National Security Council, Giora Eiland, who's still among us. He was one of the advisors during the Gaza genocide. He described in 2004, he described Gaza as a concentration camp. He said it's a huge concentration camp. So now, I knew what they had endured. I knew there had been a massacre, a slaughter of significant dimensions. And then, what do you do with it? I saw Nat Turner Rebellion, more or less analogous. The first order, kill all white people. And that's what they proceeded to do. They went from house to house, smashed the skulls of women, killed men. Even in this case, they did behead babies. Not October 7th, but during Nat Turner Rebellion. So now I have the analogy. But then there's a second step. You got the analogy, where do you stand on it? And I thought the right place to look were the abolitionists. They were of sublime moral character. They were courageous, they were consistent, and they were very smart. You don't get people smarter than Charles Sumner, Frederick Douglass. They were really impressive. And when I went back to read their writings, what became very clear was they would not condemn Nat Turner. Yeah. They would not. They condemned the white system that forced Nat Turner to do what he did, the coercive system that created Nat Turner. Then I felt, okay, if I'm wrong, than the white abolitionists and black abolitionists. They're wrong.
Including Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass is an interesting case.
Yeah.
Because the abolitionists were against violence.
Yeah.
They believed in what they called moral suasion. But Douglass described Nat Turner as one of our glorious martyrs, one of our revolutionary fathers. Same thing, W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yeah.
They all acclaimed Nat Turner. And what's also interesting is the black people at the time, they did not condemn Nat Turner. They
Nat?
were exactly.
Well, I know that's from your book.
Yeah. He came to occupy.
One of the reasons why I don't like why these types of analogies and everything are very strange is that keep in mind that the Nat Turner slave rebellion was like probably a bad thing. I'm pretty sure a bunch of slaves broke out and literally were fucking murdering everybody they could find. I don't know if they killed children. I think they did actually. I think even Finkelstein had said, but women, children, like they killed everybody they found. Now, when you say like, would you criticize them for it? Well, they were fucking slaves, you know, like it's pretty hard to criticize somebody who's literally fucking enslaved for almost anything. Like you're chattel slavery. You are a slave and your descendants will be slaves forever, and not like traditionally like you were a prisoner of war or your country had lost war. You just like are fucked from birth, you know? So it's pretty hard to criticize anybody that was involved in that revolt. I don't know if I call it good, but far be it for me to criticize a fucking slave from saying, you know what, fuck you, I'm going to kill as many of you motherfuckers as I can. But the Palestinian situation in Gaza is not like that. The Arabs had tons of choices up to today for a Palestinian state, but they rejected it. Slaves in the United States did not have a way out of, they couldn't go from slavery to indentured servitude. They couldn't go from slavery to buying my way to freedom. They had to escape or die as slaves or do a rebellion and die, right? The comparison is not good because the slaves, it's hard to feel upset about a chattel slave doing almost anything. Like, Jesus Christ, you know, like you're a chattel slave. But the Arabs and the Palestinians have always had other options. They just weren't good enough for them at the time. But when you do these constant comparisons to actual enslaved people, you're creating this idea that, and he's more or less saying it if he hasn't outwardly said it, that they can basically do whatever the fuck they want and it's always going to be justified. And then you're asking Israel to negotiate with them on the other side of that to make peace. How the fuck can you make peace with a group of people where you've said that group of people is infinitely justified in like infinite horror and torture and killing and whatever the fuck of your own population? Like, it's not possible. This is why I think this like type of rhetoric, I mean, it's not even factual. The comparison isn't even true factually. But even like from a rhetorical or from a political standpoint, you are creating a situation that you can never, ever, ever make progress in. Like, why would you, like, we never asked the slaves, can you guys like please negotiate better with your masters in order to free yourselves? Like, we had to fight a civil war for slavery. So it's, yeah, I don't know. It's not, this is why I say the international contribution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I feel like it's always just been fucking dog shit.
A place in African-American folklore, and he became a folk hero. They would refer to him as, quote, Old Nat's War. Old Nat's War. They understood, whatever the methods, whatever the horrors, and as you quoted William Lloyd Garrison, he recognized horrors occurred. But where did it come from ultimately? What was his deep source? Its deep source was the desire for freedom, struggle for human dignity. Maybe it was wrongly expressed, but there's another question. What option did they have? What option, if you're speaking honestly, what option did the people of Gaza have? They tried diplomacy. They tried international law. They tried nonviolent civil resistance. They tried everything, and it was all a dead end. And as you probably remember, by October 6, 2023, the only game in town was, would the Saudis join the Abraham Accords?
Yeah.
Gaza had been forgotten. Well, and then the rest is, so to speak, to quote the cliche, the rest is history.
Yeah. So going into this analogy a little bit further, because you brought up the fact that...
So you can't infinitely justify, I'm sorry, the Palestinian perspective is just not as dire and hopeless as the U.S. slaves was. However, that statement is true. And it's one of the more annoying things that gets brought up about Donald Trump all the time. It's like, well, peace in the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. Like, no, he made peace between countries that were already neutral to friendly towards each other. Peace in the Middle East would have been actually figuring out either a solution with Iran or a solution with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But both of those things were not addressed at all. And then instead we got the Abraham Accords, which meant fuck all. And then you had these stupid shills like Ben Shapiro and everybody, you know, running around saying, oh, we finally solved the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. Like, motherfucker, no. And then obviously you got October 7th, you know, afterwards. And it's like, yeah, this has been the pattern of history that has played out over and over again. It shouldn't really have surprised anybody, which is also why I really don't feel much sympathy for Israelis when they complain about, you know, whatever, October 7th. And it's like, how long do you guys think, like, they're gearing up for having another terrorist attack in that country if they continue on the road that they're on. And it's like, how am I supposed to feel bad for you? Like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? Like, how many times do you have to play this stupid fucking game and be like, oh my God, they're terrorists attacking us? Like, I can't even believe it. It's like, oh, that's crazy because the same fucking situation is played out over and over and over and over and over again. And it seems like you guys aren't understanding, you know, what's going on. It's stupid.
binationalism was destined to fail from the start, given the supremacist attitudes from early Zionists, doubly supremacist considering that there's the European colonialism aspect to it, but then also Jewish supremacy directly. I agree with that. But we live in the United States of America, which is a country that is objectively white supremacist in its fundamentals, and yet we now live in a country that has obviously a very complex history and still continues to struggle with offering any kind of real restitution to Black Americans. And yet, I always go back to that same comparison about the abolition of the apartheid, and that is what that is part of the reason why I present the one-state solution and forcible reintegration of everyone, including the oppressed and the oppressor, living side by side in a secular solitary state as the true North Star. Now, of course, what's more important from my perspective is how the Palestinians feel about that. And there is not that big of a commitment to a one-state solution. I think for the most part, historically, it's always been a two-state solution. There are additional complications that come along with that. But if we're just simply talking about the morality of it, or maybe even pie-in-the-sky idealism, the reason why I believe in the abolition of the occupation and the apartheid, with of course reparations offered to the Palestinians, a right to return, and everything else, not dissimilar to what Avi Shlaim has also talked about, is because I'm an American citizen. And if it can happen here, and although there are still many issues, I think the contemporary Black experience is probably better.
There's also just like, people say that Israel-Palestine is complicated. I don't know if I would necessarily say it's complicated. It's just very unique. It doesn't really map on cleanly to any other conflict on the planet in all of human history. So I think that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to analyze. And I feel like anytime you use a metaphor or you compare it to another situation, it's probably just not really working very well because there's just so much weird shit. Like the length of time for this like weird ambiguous status. It's not quite apartheid where you have like this top-down institutionalized form of racial segregation and racial dominance, but like you do have these kind of like dual systems of justice and a people who seem to not have any future and never having their grievances addressed because it's been a occupation for fucking 60, 70 years or whatever. So you do run into these issues where I don't know. It's like you like borrows from other conflicts, but I don't think there's anything that cleanly maps onto this conflict. And yeah, I think you miss a lot when you try to make it like, oh, this is just like slavery. This is just like, whatever. This other, it's just like South Africa. It's just like Algeria. It's just like whatever.
Than the current experience of a Palestinian, both in the West Bank and certainly in Gaza as well. So I feel like that is a path toward progress. It would require tremendous amounts of outside pressure from not only the international community, specifically the United States of America, American Jews as well, with connections back to Israel, familial connections. But that is what I believe. You're saying that is not possible because Zionist fascism is far too powerful of a force in Israeli society.
I wouldn't use the word fascism only because
Hasan uses fascism for everything, though.
I don't believe it's the relevant term. I think Jewish supremacy is the better description. The question, I think, it comes down to this. It's a judgment call. Remember, we had two processes in the United States. We refer to the African-American experience. They came as slaves. A civil war freed them legally, then set in the system of Jim Crow and de facto. Things were better than slavery, but not significantly better than slavery. Yeah, apartheid. And then the civil rights movement.
God.
And now I think you'd have to be very dogmatic to the point of blindness to say there hasn't been any improvement in the situation of African Americans,
of course,
since slavery, since Jim Crow, and even since the civil rights movement. That's one trajectory. Mm-hmm. There's a second trajectory. It's the Native Americans. And the Native Americans, it turned into a zero-sum game. Either it's them or us. Was there a possibility with the Native Americans, not African Americans, was there a possibility with the Native Americans of a kind of synthesis, symbiosis, transcendence? Speaking honestly, the answer is
yeah, Noam Chomsky brought this up as well, where he says that unlike the apartheid in South Africa, where there was utility to the Black population, which is 90% of the entire population as a part of the labor force, Israeli society broadly just wants to ethnically cleanse the indigenous population and would rather hire outside labor from Thailand or numerous other places around the world. So yes, it is a.
So I don't know which is the right analogy.
Yeah.
It was very striking to me when I was reading about the abolitionists, including Douglas, by the way.
I don't know what that means. I'm sure Israel does hire some outside people, but I mean, there's 2 million Arabs that live in Israel proper that like work and are part of the country, and I don't know.
They were very, very harsh on the Native Americans. They didn't have any good words or kind words to say. They all saw them. I'm talking about Douglas, Sumner, the others. They all saw the Native Americans as savages. And it was, if the Euro-American project was to advance, they had to be pushed aside. It was zero-sum. There was no notion that we can live together. So the question is, which is the Israeli experience closer to? I'm inclined, look, I don't want to be totally pessimistic about it, and I recognize people change. Let's say you could say Germany and Japan were horror shows during the first third of the 20th century. They were, you could say, at the extreme end of imperialist, racist countries, okay? You could say, okay,
really?
Germany and Japan, they're no longer horror shows. That's true. They're probably in the more Pacific end of the political spectrum. But the Jewish question was solved. It was solved by their extermination. So they didn't have to contend with it.
There's also a lot of residual racism in Japanese society as well.
Right.
I'm not talking about the German philosophical,
right.
Yeah.
But there are all sorts of nuances. But the bottom line is, yes, it's true. Germany today.
Can you stand on the one-state solution? I personally don't understand it. Well, the idea is like nobody is going to be happy with the way the land is allotted after any two-state solution. You're going to have a disjointed Palestinian state with some highway to connect the two. It's going to be hard to figure out the security arrangements. It's just going to be really sloppy. So if everybody could just live together in one country, that would be good. and then it would be the same vote to every person. There would probably be an Arab majority, but since it's a democratic society, everybody would love each other and get along, and things would go okay. But that's like but I think the one-state solution basically just seeks to avoid all of the awkward conversations about how do you split up territory, what do you do about the right of return, what do you do about like holy sites, East Jerusalem, the Old City. Like all of these things become non-factors now. They're irrelevant if you can just like have a single unified country, which is nice. It simplifies a lot, but realistically, it's probably not, the Jewish people there probably are not going to be too keen on seeing them potentially or completely removed from the Middle East with no recourse. Because, like, let's be real, if something were to happen where, you know, you have an Arab majority society that now begins to engage in pogroms or whatever the fuck against the Jewish people there, they're not getting any help internationally.
Is very far where Germany was in the 1930s. But it's also true to say the Jewish question was solved. It was solved by their extermination. The Native American question was basically solved in our country by their expulsion and significantly, not entirely, but there were significantly elements of extermination. So I'm not sure. As I say, I don't want to be totally pessimistic, though one thing I am totally pessimistic about, the current mindset of Israelis is just off the charts. One thing I think is there are several misunderstandings about the conflict, and one misunderstanding is it's not a war. There was never a war in Gaza. Every time you use the word war to describe what happened in Gaza,
genocide.
You become wittingly or unwittingly a tool of Israeli propaganda.
Yeah.
Once you say war to describe the unfolding of events, Israel has won 90% of the propaganda battle. Once we two are sitting here, you may say you're against what's happening. I say I support what Israel is doing in Gaza. But if
You see how they understand? Fuck me, dude. This is why I just want to be on one of their teams. It's so much easier when you're on their side, right? Because I make these arguments on my side, and then people have to fucking tone police me all day, right? When he says, when you call it a war, you've won 90% of the battle. That's why you have to call it a genocide. And then meanwhile, on my side, I'm like, well, I don't call it a genocide because I feel like we can analyze the facts. But once you call it a genocide, you basically eliminated all rational conversation. They understand this. This is why they insist on the term. But then over here, we're like, well, maybe it is a genocide, and maybe we should call it a genocide. Okay, you can do that, I guess, if you want. But like, you're not doing anybody any favors. You're just like helping their propaganda on their side. That's the only thing that's happening, you know?
established as the common language the war in Gaza, Israel has won 90%. There was never a war in Gaza.
Yeah.
A war denotes something very clear. It denotes you're trying to inflict a military defeat on the opposing army. That's what a war is, to inflict a military defeat on the opposing army. Now, in the course of a war, civilians sometimes get killed. It's called the technical term collateral damage.
Yeah.
Also, virtually every war, but not every war, but virtually every war, has a terror component. That is, you're targeting the civilians in order to break the will of the other side. But even when you have a terroristic component, the goal is to inflict that military defeat. A genocide is kind of just the opposite. The goal of the genocide is to exterminate the civilian population.
Yeah.
It's not collateral damage. It's not even a secondary component like in terror bombing. It's the goal. And defeating the military in a genocide is completely secondary. You're not trying to defeat the military in a genocide. You're trying to extinguish the whole population.
Yeah.
So if you take the case of Gaza, I know there are a lot of people on the left like to say, Hamas is resisting and Hamas has put up a resistance and Israel hasn't achieved its aim. That's just fantasy. If I were to ask you followed events closely since October 7th, can you name me one battle in Gaza? A battle. Have you heard of a single battle in Gaza?
The Flower Massacre.
I follow it every day.
Electronic Intifada does a decent job of covering some of the aesthetic on-the-ground resistance elements. But you're right, it's not like a real battle.
I believe it's fantasy.
Yeah.
And the problem is, it's not just fantasy.
Elements, but you're right, it's not like a real battle.
I believe it's fantasy.
Yeah.
And the problem is, I've not in Gaza. I haven't. I follow it every day.
Electronic Intifada does a decent job of covering some of the aesthetic on-the-ground resistance elements. But you're right, it's not like a real battle.
I believe it's fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't. I'm sorry. He doesn't understand what he means. Generally, what Finkelstein is pointing to is when you have like real wars, usually in real wars or real conflicts, usually there will be like big battles that are happening in certain regions as like that are like big landmarks for the war. The Battle of Stalingrad or the Battle of whatever. Like there'll be big battles that people will know about. But in the Israeli-Gaza war conflict or whatever, he wouldn't want to call it that. People say, you don't even know of any big battles because there aren't, because there isn't like an oppositional military force that's having like a big battle, I don't know how, with guerrilla warfare though, like how true it is that you will have big battles. Like were there big battles, known battles in like Vietnam? Will you think of like the Battle of whatever? I know for Iraq, it was finally, I think there was like the Battle of Mosul or whatever. Mosul? However you pronounce it. Oh, you had the Tet Offensive, sure. I don't know if that was considered a single thing or not. Khan Yunis? Yeah, there were cities that they cleared out, I guess. I guess they just don't have formal names. I guess I don't know why as much that doesn't happen. I don't know if there are any big battles. You have battles over a couple big airports, I know, for Ukraine, but I don't know.
The problem is, it's not just fantasy. It it feeds the Israeli propaganda. Because they can keep saying, Hamas is not yet disarmed. We won't leave Gaza until Hamas is disarmed. And you give them a pretext. You give them an excuse to protract the genocide.
I don't know. I don't know for Gaza if you would ever have. It's an informal military that fights from buildings in civilian outfits. I don't know if you would have like huge standoffs. The only big battle that I would remember, big quote unquote battle, was the second or third time they'd gone up north through. I don't know if it was Gaza City, but I think it was through. It might have been the Al Shifa Hospital, where it had been like reoccupied by Hamas fighters, and there was like a huge battle there. But I don't know if it's going to be named or anything. But
so there, I believe, that's one misunderstanding of the nature of the conflict in Gaza. And there was a second, but just let my mind, it'll come back to me. Sure. Where I believe that you have to get the language right to understand what happened there.
Yeah. It's always been an ethnic cleansing campaign from the Nakba onward. And even before that, pogroms here and there, it was always settler colonial ambition.
I would say that there, as I say, I agree with Benny Morris.
Yeah.
The idea of transfer was inevitable.
Yeah.
Now, there were periods when they were willing to settle with confining the population, keeping, as I said, to keep as much of the land and as few of the people.
Yeah.
What made October 7th different was Israel changed its strategy. Its strategy up until October 7th was, they're very open
Mowing
about
the lawn.
it. Yeah, it was mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
Periodically, they'll go in and remind the natives who's in charge.
Yeah.
Or even just use Gaza as an excuse for various other goals they had. But after October 7th, they decided, now we're going to solve the Gaza question.
Yeah.
And solving the Gaza question was very clear. They were very clear about it from day one. They were going to, instead of mow the lawn, they were going to extirpate. For your listeners, extirpate is the fancy word for pull out by the roots.
Yeah.
They were going to extirpate every blade of grass in Gaza. And that meant including the 1.1 million children. And that was their goal. And then their means, their method of carrying out this massive ethnic cleansing, the means was genocide. It was going to intentionally target the civilian population for destruction until and unless Gaza was emptied out of its Arab population.
Can I ask you something about October 7 in particular? Because there's two different schools of thought on this, where some people have looked at the prior knowledge that the Israeli security forces must have had. There was obviously talks of Egypt giving a forewarning, advance warning. The Unit 8200 was surveilling Gaza. Gaza is the most surveilled territory on the planet, pretty much, an open-air prison, a concentration camp. What is your assessment on whether or not this was utilized as an opportunity, where there was forewarning, there was advance warning that a military campaign could take place by the Palestinian Resistance Front, and that Benjamin Netanyahu would probably try to use this as a opportunity to create casus belli to carry out the final solution to the, Palestinian question?
Well, first of all, we're going to be here for a while. And you should feel free to ask me any questions. You said you were scared, so you should overcome.
No, I'm getting more confident. I'm getting more comfortable.
You should overcome your fear and be aggressive in your questioning. And these questions, I'm sure, come up, what you just asked, come up with your listeners. And here's an opportunity, not for me to give a definitive answer, but certainly to give an informed opinion on this subject. First of all, let's take an analogy. Analogies are never perfect, but they serve a purpose. If you look at 9/11, there were many people in the administration who predicted Osama bin Laden would launch an attack.
Yeah.
There was one national intelligence fellow, I forgot his name, he wrote a book on the subject, where he said, I knew from day one. From the moment it happened, he ran into the Oval Office and he said, it's Osama bin Laden. I know it's Osama bin Laden. He had been on their radar, and they had received warnings that something like this would happen.
The Northern Force in Afghanistan had actually tried to deliver Osama bin Laden to the United States of America for his, cooperation in the previous World Trade Center bombing with Line Sheikh, and those people were assassinated prior.
I don't recall that detail, so you'll forgive me.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you're a country like the United States and Israel, you're being bombarded with threats, possible threats, potential threats every day. And then you have to have a hierarchy, which you're going to take seriously and which you're not going to take seriously. No, when you're so saturated with racism, like people like Netanyahu and his folks, they don't believe Hamas could pull something like that off.
Yeah.
Hamas was a shooting gallery. I mean, Gaza was a shooting gallery for Israel.
Yeah.
It was, as I call it, these were high-tech killing sprees, which they used to launch into Gaza. The discrepancy in number killed, like 100 to 1, 200 to 1. They didn't think Hamas had the capability, the capacity to pull off something like that. So I'm sure they received reports.
I don't think Hamas thought that they
I
had that
totally
capacity
agree.
as well.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
They
admitted it as such.
were shocked by how easy it was.
Yeah.
So
how much of that do you think is hubris, and how much of that do you think could have been maybe hubris paired up with opportunity?
Well, there's a cliche. The cliche goes, every crisis is an opportunity. When 9/11 happened, they got together in the Situation Room. Cheney, Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, and they shed 4 or 5 salty tears. And then they rubbed their palms. No, seriously.
Yeah, no.
What can we get out of it? What can we get out of it? And they then start contemplating. If you read the accounts, they're looking at the map. Which country should we attack? Which country? A crisis is an opportunity. Now, as you know, the big opportunity for them, they started with Afghanistan, but Afghanistan was small change. They were going to go after, in their minds, it was going to be Iraq, Syria, Iran. That was what they were going to. They were going to exploit everything they could out of 9/11. And that was exactly the Israelis. It was going to be first Gaza, if the opportunity arises, the West Bank, and then it's going to be Hezbollah, Syria, Iran.
How do they explain the population growth in Gaza and the West Bank with this designation of Israel conducting a genocide, or the two facts not immediately disqualifying each other? Technically you can have a population growth during a genocide, and then I don't know how they explain all the interim population growth if Israel truly is trying to get rid of the Palestinians. They usually just hand wave it and say something along the lines of if Israel acted too crazy, then that would mean that the genocide would get discovered by the international community. I don't know. They say something dumb about it. I don't know. What are you going to do?
Every crisis is an opportunity, but I don't think there's any rational point in denying it was a real crisis. And they're just not the type, because they attach such value to a Jewish life and no value to any non-Jewish life. They're not the type that would allow
sacrificing the envelope. So that's actually really interesting. I agree with you 100% on this. My attitude on this has been part hubris and part, at most, it would be a couple people that get slaughtered as a sacrificial lamb to enact a much larger campaign of death and destruction, and this will be the cause belli. But of course,
I like how he says, I agree with you, but then he just explains exactly why. No, he doesn't agree with you. Hasan does believe that there was some kind of conspiracy theory here, because why not? Because it's Jews. But that's cute. Fucking coward.
of course, unfolded in a way that the Israeli security apparatus could not have predicted.
Wait, Destiny, how do you square that circle? How is it possible to be genocided and a growing population? I don't know. Ask fucking Pisco or the other pro-genocide people. I'm not sure. I don't know. I just think there are so many great arguments for why the Palestinian situation is so tragic, and why we should be using our leverage on Israel to push that country in a better direction, to have an actual solution for this problem that is equitable for both sides. But I mean, people just want to scream genocide all day. So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
That Hamas itself could not have predicted as well, and perhaps that's the middle ground. I don't know, but that's my assessment. I'm not married to the idea either, but I don't believe that it was pre-planned. That Benjamin Netanyahu was allowing 1,200 Israelis to be killed, with as many civilians that were killed in the process as well. The part of the reason why I bring this up is because there's some information about the Nova Festival, adding an additional day, being so close to the border wall, and things of that nature have raised suspicions, even inside of the Israeli population as well. There have been some inquiries.
The Nova, for your listeners, was a music festival, the Supernova Music Festival, and the largest number of people killed by far in the total, about 350 of the total number of those killed. As far as it's known, Hamas didn't even know what was going to happen. They just stumbled on it, the Nova Festival. It probably, you could speculate, but it probably enraged them. Right, bordering on this concentration camp, all these young people who are overwhelmingly of military age, because the Nova was young men and women, they're all having this festival. It almost feels like a taunt. And so it was very bloody. No question in my mind about it. But I don't think, as far as I understand, they were not knowledgeable that festival was going to happen. I think there's a tendency on the left, and not just the left, actually across the political spectrum, to always want to see conspiracies. And I think a lot of things happen.
Should pressure be put on a Palestinian leadership since they have never been open to two states? Yeah, but who do you pressure? Who is the Palestinian leadership? Because there is no unified Palestinian government. I would say in decent part because Israel kind of likes it that way. So Gaza and the West Bank have been kept separated. And then so if you don't have anybody to negotiate against, who do you even talk to when it comes time to talk about having some kind of, I don't know, negotiations? Who is the Palestinian leader,
Which actually, in politics and history, which can be explained. They cannot. There are all sorts of, so to speak, loose ends. I can't really explain how that happened. It doesn't change the total picture. I remember, if I can give one anecdote, there was a famous trial in the UK. It was a Holocaust denier. His name was David Irving, very prominent historian.
Deborah
Lipstadt.
Yeah, Deborah Lipstadt.
David Irving was an extremely smart guy. I wouldn't call him brilliant, but he was definitely a competent historian. Deborah Lipstadt's just a talking cow. She's a complete imbecile.
For those who don't know, she was Biden's anti-Semitism czar, and also a horrifyingly right-wing, genocide denier herself.
I wouldn't even.
He hates her.
Dignify her with politics. She's just an imbecile.
Jesus.
In any event,
She's the one who's made the Bieber jokes. And
wait, oh fuck, did I know this at some point? Does he still defend Irving? Irving is considered a disgraced historian after that trial that I imagine he's about to mention. I don't know how you could possibly side with Irving if you follow anything related to that trial, but okay, that's very fucking weird, but okay.
Has very vociferously defended Israel's genocide.
Yeah, or she defended. Talking about somebody Jewish nursing home in Miami defending. In any event, so there's a point in the trial. David Irving conducted the trial himself. He was the defendant. By the way, in the trial, the lawyers would not let Deborah Lipstadt speak. She was in the gag, her own lawyers, because they knew the moment she opened her mouth, they're going to lose the case, because she's a complete imbecile. In any event, there was a point in the trial where one of the leading historians in the Nazi Holocaust, his name is Christopher Browning, and David Irving presents Browning with a document. And the document seems to say the opposite of what it should say. And Irving looks at the document and he says, "You're correct. It does say exactly the opposite of what I would have guessed." So Irving said, "How do you explain that?" And you know what Browning said? "I can't. I can't. There are all sorts of things that happen which there isn't a clear explanation. But that doesn't mean the overall picture is wrong. A Nazi Holocaust did happen, even if you can't explain this or that document." And it's the same thing, I believe, that what happens with conspiracy theories is they take one point here, one point there, and then inflate it to prove the whole thing could not have happened. No, the whole thing did happen, but this point and that point can't really explain it. Can't really explain it. That I believe is it's a problem with these conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Overall, I think the picture is pretty clear, though I acknowledge we should be careful about this. Not careful, cautious. Israel has never led an international human rights investigation of what happened. They've not let them in. So we're relying in significant part on testimonies which human rights organizations...
I mean, does anybody lead an international thing in their country? I feel like international stuff usually has to step in when you failed So why would you, in general, like why that would have to be forced upon you? No.
Received over the web, in front of a computer screen,
Yeah.
and on an Israeli information. But as I said, on what we know so far, I think the general picture is a slaughter of a significant magnitude occurred.
Yeah.
The question is not whether the slaughter occurred. I believe it did. It's explaining it, understanding it.
Yeah.
And that's what I tried to do in the book, to try to make sense of it.
Yeah. As far as the slaughter goes, I don't think people deny that. Or I guess maybe there are some.
No, there are quite a few.
I guess there are some people who want to operate under the boundaries of perfect victimhood in some respects, where they also think that resistance is supposed to be perfect, which is something that I've brought up over and over again, and actually been yelled at quite a bit by the likes of Josh Gottheimer. I've been the ADL has been after me for the past 3 years, and they've created this glossary for me as the arch anti-Semite, as they call me. Which is laughable because I've spent my whole life combating fascism and combating anti-Semitism as well. And one of the things that they constantly go back to, and this ties into the second chapter of your book that we're going to get to in a second, is at the time I was talking to people in my audience in a relatively hostile environment where they were frustrated with me, and they were saying, like, why don't you just reflexively deny that the likelihood that rapes happened at all? And there's this moment where I respond to them and say, look, at the time, we did not have enough evidence for whether it had happened or not. But there was certainly evidence unfolding that there was no systematic mass rapes that had taken place at the directive of Hamas leadership. That was very clearly something that you also point to in chapter 2 of your book, where you extensively cover the ways in which the propaganda apparatus greatly overemphasizes these heinous sexual crimes that took place with very little evidence at the time to tie it back to white supremacists. The birth of a nation comparisons were made. The barbaric indigenous forces are engaging in sullying the superior women of the Israeli population. So I responded with, it doesn't matter if rapes happened on October 7th. That doesn't change the calculation for me at all. Whether or not they happened at the time, we didn't have enough evidence. But even if it did, it wouldn't justify genocide. And that's something that, to this day, CNN and all these other outlets love utilizing as a quote that they clipped out of context to say, oh, like, it doesn't matter if rapes happened on October 7th. And I find that very frustrating, as a way to try to create an environment of censorship through bullying of this sort. But I really appreciated the amount of detail that you, the amount of attention you gave to the ways in which the UN commissioned these reports, specifically detailing sometimes falsehoods that were then discredited after the fact. And I want to hear your perspective on why you thought that it was important to at least take out one of the ways in which I think Western media and a lot of international organs of justice supposedly played a role in aiding and abetting the propaganda of Israel to justify Israel's genocide.
Well, that's a large question. And you're going to have to keep me on point, because there are several issues that you raised. First of all, the first 2 points you made are completely correct, in my opinion. Number one, rapes could have happened.
Yeah.
People who I have high respect for, when the issue first came up, I was skeptical. I was skeptical on personal grounds. Okay? I had been to Gaza. Remember, and here we can disagree. Okay? The scenes that they were describing, they were kind of like this kind of frat boy bravado. Gang rapes, cutting off a woman's breast, playing touch football with a woman's breast.
Rabbi Shmuley.
I had been to Gaza. I knew the young men there. And the kinds of scenes that they were describing seemed to require a kind of sexual self-confidence that didn't seem to click with the young men in Gaza. So from the beginning, I was a bit skeptical. But then friends of mine, I won't name them, people you know, they say, look, Norm, in times of war, crazy things happen, rape happens, sexual violence happens. No reason to assume that it didn't happen here. So, like you...
That was my initial assessment as well.
So like you, I agreed on that point at the beginning. I didn't accept it, but I saw it as a plausible possibility that I have to be open. Number two, you're absolutely correct. In the big picture, listen, we all agree killing people is worse than raping them. That should be pretty obvious. As a crime, murder ranks higher than rape. Now, some people say don't rank them. No, we always rank them. That's why we have homicide, murder, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder. We're always making hierarchies of crimes. We have misdemeanors.
I mean, like, strictly speaking, this is true, but it's also like you have to be careful how you tango with this one, because one can be justified, but the other is not. Like, if you come across a bunch of soldiers and you see a whole bunch of soldiers were killed by, or a whole bunch of people were killed by soldiers or whatever, we can conceive of worlds where, like, well, maybe the civilians were fighting, or maybe they tried to ambush the soldiers or whatever. There's worlds where killing them is conceivable. Rape is basically it's never conceivable. Like, oh, well, maybe they really had to rape these people. I think the problem with rape, aside from the rape, is you're showing, like, a very bad level of intent that's just no bueno, no good, I think. I'm not aware of the rape self-defense cases.
So, if 1,200 people were killed, that's horrible enough. Why? It's not going to change the big picture if rape and sexual violence happen. It's wrong, it's terrible, but the big picture was horrible enough, which actually raised a very interesting question. The interesting question is,
yes,
if it didn't happen, why did Israel make that their litmus test? That's where they laid down, they threw down the gauntlet. You had to agree that sexual violence, including rape, happened, or you became the equivalent of a Holocaust denier. And it was an interesting question. Why did you make that your red line? There were so many other red lines, killing children, and all sorts of other pretty terrible things that happened October 7th. Why did they make that the red line? And that brings us to the next question. why did they make a red line of something that didn't happen? That to me is a point of reflection. If you look at the record, and I've gone through it as closely as possible, if you look at the record, what do we know? Let's start with the basics. There's no forensic evidence of rape. Now, Israel had a plausible explanation of that. The plausible explanation was they weren't prepared for a crime of this magnitude, 1,200 corpses. And so they processed the bodies very quickly to prepare for the ritual death, the ritual burying, okay? They didn't preserve any bodily fluids and any other signs that a rape had occurred. I don't know if it's true or not, but I would say it's certainly plausible. So I was willing to set aside the absence of any forensic evidence of rape. So now, you have no forensic evidence of rape. That's going to leave, for material evidence, we'll leave witnesses aside for a moment. Material evidence, there's no, Camilla Patton, who was the UN Special Envoy, she says very late in her report, she says, no medical legal evidence of rape. And then that brings us to the second material evidence of rape, and that is digital evidence. Now, digital evidence is a very interesting case. So listen up. Most recent report that came out by an Israeli, Dr. El-Kayem Levy, she says we have 10,000 photographs and digital segments from October 7th. 10,000. She also says it would take 1,800 hours to go through all of that digital and photographic evidence from October 7th. Now, if you do the simple calculation, which I did, and I was going over it in my mind last night to make sure for your show I don't get it wrong, you know, if you were a single researcher and you were working 8 hours a day, every day of the week, including weekends, you know how long it would take you to go through all of that digital evidence?
How long?
More than 7 months. And it was a very confined area. It was the Gaza envelope.
Yeah.
Okay? So, as a first approximation, you could say, not much could have escaped the collective lens of 10,000 photographs and digital segments.
Including GoPro camera footage from the militants themselves.
We're going to go through CCTV, traffic cameras, iPhones, on the militants themselves, body cams, dash cams, GoPros. So now, where was the digital evidence? There isn't one. I hope your viewers will hear this. Your listeners. There is not one single frame of Hamas committing rape or sexual violence. Bear in mind, there's not only just an absence of any digital evidence, which would take 7 months to go through, of all the various technological paraphernalia, CCTV, traffic cameras, body cam, dash cam, GoPro, not one of rape, not one of sexual violence, not one frame. Now, here's the thing that's most perplexing. So in that most recent report by Dr. El-Kayem Levy, he says that Hamas instrumentalized all this digital evidence to terrorize Israeli society. They purposely posted horrific pictures on their social media. They sent pictures to family members. So if Hamas had any pictures of sexual violence or rape, they should have posted it, according to her. That's what she said. They were purposely posting horrific images to terrify and terrorize Israeli society. They didn't post anything. So in my opinion, what's the only possible conclusion? If they didn't post any, it's because they didn't have any such images. And if they didn't have any such images, it's because it never happened.
Yes, including the body camera footage that Israel also extracted later down the line as well from some militants.
Yes,
that were
captured and killed. He took the cameras. There was nothing there. Now, you might say, well, Hamas didn't want to damage its reputation by filming that stuff, but there's a problem with
Israel
it.
would present this as evidence.
So you can make the argument maybe they turned off the camera. I don't believe it for a moment. But the problem with it is you said that they were instrumentalizing these pictures in order to terrify and terrorize. So they wouldn't have turned off the camera. They would have purposely photographed it and then transmitted it. So by their own argument, it couldn't have happened. Now, as I said,
so let's talk about the why. Why
do they fake it?
Sexual assault? Like sexual assault directed by Hamas. Why was that the initial?
Because it helps to dehumanize the Arabs, the Palestinians.
I think there are basically two reasons. First of all of Israeli propaganda is directed at American society. And in the United States, the dark-hued Arab raping a virginal white woman, it has a deep historical resonance. So it was going to play well here. The second reason, and I probably will get criticized for this, is because of the woke culture. And that's what I think happened with the UN investigations, what happened with the Human Rights Watch investigation, what happened with the Amnesty.
When they're investigating Israel and they see crimes from the Palestinians, it's because they've gone super woke. But when they see Israel's doing crimes, they're being objective and fair. True. This is why I say that when people ask me, like, oh, why do you always trust the UN and everything but Israel, blah, blah, blah. For Israel shit, I just have to read the underlying stuff. Because everybody is so mind-fucked, whether it's pro or anti-Israel when it comes to the UN, everybody's so mind-fucked on this country. You just have to read the underlying shit. There's no shortcut for that because you can never trust any top-line takeaways from anything because people get fucking wacky.
Investigation. Because Me Too, believe women, you're not allowed to question. They don't like Muslims to begin with. These liberal organizations, they don't. I mean, I can speak at length about the relationship. Human rights organizations had a very different relationship with the West Bank than they did with Gaza, because in the West Bank, Ramallah is like another metropolis. Has a higher standard of living than most big cities in the world. They can relate to that secular culture in Ramallah. They can't relate to Gaza. And so there's always been, by the liberal, secular human rights organizations, the UN, there's always been a double standard when it came to Gaza. So I think that there was a certain kind of certainty that you could play that card and get away with it when it came to sexual violence and rape, which you couldn't, which in other aspects, the human rights organizations weren't dead in their investigations. It was this particular issue where they capitulated, and I think they capitulated because of the woke culture.
So you then...
I mean, there were points where it's just, I mean, it was really, I have to say, it was stomach churning. So they wanted to prove, let's say, take the case of the UN Commission of Inquiry, head by Navi Pillay, who was the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, a respected figure in South African Indians. So she knows there's no evidence of sexual violence. She knows there's no forensic evidence, digital evidence, but she has to go along with the woke culture. So what does she do? She says, well, we saw pictures of women hostages who were taken and that they were placed on motor scooters or motorcycles between two Hamas militants. You think, yeah, okay, that's one place. And we all know taking hostages is wrong, not a complicated question. What does this have to do with sexual violence? So she says, by placing two Hamas militants in the front and back of her, Hamas was guilty expression, coerced intimacy.
His mic.
Okay, taking hostages.
Hasan, fix it.
But is there a new rule of international law that if you take a woman hostage, you have to book an Uber? I mean, this is just stupid. But they were so desperate, clutching at straws to come up with an argument. As I said, I think it was in large part, first of all, it's the revulsion against Muslim men. And they were honest about that, by the way. They said in the human rights reports that Israel in particular was targeting Muslim young men and older men. That was clearly a target. I think they even called it acts of extermination or crimes against humanity. But the truth of the matter is they all carry that.
Targeting where? Well, hold on. Wouldn't we want that? Doesn't that make sense? In war, you're targeting the men and the adult or the older male children, if you're saying 16, 17, like, because you would expect these people to be the combatants? Isn't that, as opposed to what, targeting the women?
Prejudice. And the Israelis knew that prejudice would resonate in the American...
Or maybe they mean targeting with propaganda,
in the United
maybe?
States in particular. And the truth is, very few people challenged it. I mean, there were people who challenged it, no question about it. But it took a certain amount of, I don't want to call it courage, but you knew that you were going against the current. People like Sheryl Sandberg, the former chief operating officer of Meta, best known for her book Lean In.
Yeah.
He did this documentary called Screams Before Silence. Complete nonsense.
Yeah, you compared it to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation,
Nonsense.
arguing that she leans in on primordial racialized tropes of the feral, dark-hued rapist that mobilize Western psychic demons, similar to how Birth of a Nation incited lynchings of black people.
Very good contribution, Hasan.
And the thing with Sheryl Sandberg is no fool. We should be clear about that. She attended Harvard. She studied economics. She was the top economics student in her class. Sheryl Sandberg knows what evidence
Do
is.
they not like human rights orgs or being woke? Finkelstein is definitely like I don't know if you would call him an old school liberal guy, but he's definitely not a wokey dude. Definitely. Absolutely not. I don't know if I would say he's like conservative or whatever on social values or whatever, but I don't think he's woke at all.
This is not some Deborah Lichstedt. This is somebody who has high standards of evidence. But then when it came to this, it's the cause. It's the cause. Now, in the cause, there's the cause, and there are the facts. And the facts are trivial things as compared to the cause. And for her, Israel must live. So whether she does it wittingly, unwittingly, I have no idea. But she manages either convince herself that these are facts, or she convinces herself that the fact that the cause is more important. Someone like Alan Dershowitz, who I've had interactions with, and I know pretty well his mind. But for Alan Dershowitz, it's just the cause. He knows what. He knows what. Someone like her, I don't know.
Okay.
What I do know for certain is there's no evidence.
And so on the other side of that, there is also the verified incidents by the UN of sexual violence by Israeli forces against Palestinian detainees in State Haman, Ketziot, Ofer. However, in March 2026, the charges against these State Haman reservists were dropped entirely. And this also led to something I call the pro-rape January 6th riots that unfolded in Israel as well. It was a massive controversy. It got very little coverage in the United States of America because, unfortunately, our corporate media is completely complicit in Israel's actions. That I think the initial prosecution of those 6 concentration camps guards were also in an effort to utilize or weaponize complementarity against the International Criminal Court, in my opinion. That's speculative. You may disagree with that. I don't know. I think
you should explain for your listeners what you mean by complementarity, because it's important for people to have clarity about these issues. The way our international legal system works.
Fuck! Oh my god, I thought he was going to ask us how to explain that. I would be really curious if we actually learned what that word meant. Oh shit. Fuck! Oh, why didn't he have him do it? I wonder if Hasan's heart rate just fucking spiked. Generally speaking, you don't really rely on international law to solve problems in countries. Usually you let the country take a shot at it first, and the international law is only there to supplement it afterwards if the international community or if a lot of people in your country feel like there's been a massive failing. So this is the principle in international law of like complementarity. You allow the domestic courts to take a shot at it first. If they fuck up, well then the ICC has to come in, or a NATO mission to go bomb your shit.
Every nation should prosecute its war criminals.
Yeah.
And if it shows good faith prosecutions, then we're not going to interfere. We will let you carry out, and even if you acquit somebody, so long as you show good faith, you basically follow the protocol, the procedures, we will defer to the judgment of your national court. So complementarity means if you do your job, we don't need to do our job. We're not going to interfere. But if the evidence is you're not doing your job, then we will. Complementarity is not I am, it's EM, meaning we complete what you didn't do. So if you didn't do your job, then we're going to complete the job by doing what you should have done. So your point is that Israel sometimes pretends as if it's doing its job, it's carrying out its prosecutions, and therefore the international institutions like the ICC don't have to do their job because you're already doing their job for them. Yeah, so occasionally Israel will pretend, though. But in recent times, they don't pretend very much anymore.
No. And this was one of those instances where I believe not only did the primary responsible party actually unmask himself on Israeli television, became a folk hero of sorts. There was a Knesset session, an emergency Knesset session in which one of the ministers of the Knesset had told a Palestinian minister of the Knesset that that the Israeli concentration camp guards had every right to anally rape and brutalize and murder the Palestinians inside of their prisons as well.
Well, one of the differences between the claims against Hamas and the claims against Israelis, the Israelis posted a lot of sexual violence on their own social media.
Yes.
The stripping of the Palestinians and things of that sort. They themselves posted it on their social media. That just, in the case of Hamas, as I'm sure you know, the attack occurs on October 7th in the dawn and pre-dawn hours. And so, and also the Supernova Music Festival was a free love festival that was advertised as free love. So a lot of people were naked when the attack occurred. And so there were naked bodies because they were running. They were under attack and everyone's, a hysteria.
I've never heard that claim before. Maybe that's true. Never saw any naked running people in any videos. I've never heard that claim before in my entire life. But I don't know. That's a first.
Rightful hysteria broke out. So there were naked bodies, for sure. That part I don't contest. The question is, did Hamas order them? Were they engaged in active sexual violence? There's no evidence for it. But in the case of Israel, they posted on the social media the fact that they were ordering them to strip in the middle of the street in front of their families and so on and so forth. So the evidence was there in the case of Israel, but there was none in the case of Hamas.
So on July 15, 2025, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres released his conflict-related sexual violence report, which blacklisted Hamas, but omitted Israel, despite extensive verified digital evidence of the Israeli military's systematic sexual abuse of bound Palestinian detainees. You wrote that Guterres will henceforth carry forever the stench of a Judas. What were the immediate geopolitical pressures that led to his capitulation, and how did this trigger the sudden resignation of the entire Pilley Commission of Inquiry the day before?
Well, unfortunately, those questions we'll not know the answer. What happened was there was a huge amount of pressure put on the Secretary General. He issues an annual report on sexual violence and conflict. And then there's an appendix or an annex with the main perpetrators. And the Israelis were determined to get Hamas on that list of major perpetrators. Yeah,
I guess, I don't know. This stuff is exhausting. When he talks about sexual violence against Palestinians, so I'll admit I have not watched I haven't looked into the rape protest shit because by this point it's fucking, nobody wanted to talk Israel Palestine anyway because it was all just fucking propaganda. But when they talk about Palestinians being forced to strip naked and then lined up or whatever, I don't know if I've seen any that are fully naked, but less than 3,000. I don't think I've seen any fully naked, but they do have to undress these people to some extent because people will hide like fucking, like booby traps or guns or whatever else on their persons. Like it sounds bad, but I mean, like, again, Israel does do some things are genuinely unhinged, but then other things appear unhinged. But the issue is you have a side, and nobody ever acknowledges this, like Hamas's goal is to do the actions that will induce the maximum amount of civilian casualty. And they literally booby trap bodies, they booby trap homes, they booby trap civilians, they suicide bomb. Like this, like these are just things that, make it so when you're dealing with a Palestinian population, you have to take sometimes insane measures to, I don't know, to conduct a war or whatever the fuck else, but what are you going to do?
Sexual violence in conflict. Now you understand. If they got Hamas on, but they also got Israel on, that's going to cancel the victory for Israel because they can't boast that Hamas is on without being told, well, guess what? So are you. And so, as typically happens, an enormous amount of pressure is put on Guterres. And it's happened many times before in the UN system. I've written about it in regard to Palestine. And I think a lot of the pressure came from women's groups and human rights groups to get Israel put on it. Remember the Pramila Patten investigation. That was the initial claim about Hamas sexual violence. That wasn't the UN commission. That was a special commission appointed by Guterres. And I'm sure the pressure. And what form does it take? I can't tell you. I don't know. Has it happened before? Yeah, there have been many times. Not many, but there have been times that it happened. If you take the case, which most of your viewers and listeners will not remember, in May 2010, a humanitarian flotilla was headed towards Gaza.
Mavi Marmara.
Right. And the lead ship, the flagship, was the Mavi Marmara. Israel attacks the Mavi Marmara in international waters and commits, as is routine for them, a massacre among the passengers. 9 people were initially killed, the 10 persons killed later.
So when they say attack a flotilla in international waters, the flotilla was making a beeline for the Gaza shores. The Israeli Coast Guard says, hey, you're not allowed to come here. And they say they don't give a fuck. They're going anyway. When the IDF boarded the ship, all the people on the ship had like steel chairs, bats, steel whatever bars that they had cut to fight. Supposedly there were gunshots, and I think the IDF claims that the guns were thrown overboard, so they couldn't find them at the end. But I believe at least one soldier had like a 9mm bullet wound, and they don't shoot 9mm from the Israeli side, so it would have had to have been the other people shooting. But I mean, I don't know. What are you gonna do?
Large numbers of people were terrorized and so forth. And this time, Gulen had a problem. The Mavi Marmara was Turkish. It was overwhelmingly Turks on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't owned by the Mavi Marmara. That was the Comoros, but it was a Turkish vessel.
Yeah.
Okay? And the head of Turkey, who was still the head, Hasan, he put a lot of pressure. So Gutierrez appoints this fake commission to vindicate Israel. Say Israel did wrong. And they did the same. Now, after October 7th, he creates this fake commission headed by Pramila Patten, who says that I have documented cases of rape. And then the next step is they wanted to get Hamas on that list, and he capitulated. Now, as I said at the very beginning, Gutierrez wasn't terrible. He was not. A lot of statements he made were pretty tough. He was a lot better than Ban Ki-moon would have been his predecessor. He wasn't terrible. But in the moment of truth, he failed Gaza. And then you know what he did? A new report was issued, because it's a periodic report. This time, he put Israel on the list. Now, you might be wondering, why did he do it this time? You know why he did this? Because he has 6 months in office.
Oh.
So he has nothing to worry about. The show is over. If you look at the last days of Ban Ki-moon, said nothing during the various Israeli killing sprees in Gaza. At the very end, the last days, he says something. You take the case of Fatou Bensouda. She was the former chief prosecutor
Of the International Criminal Court.
International Criminal Court. Her whole term she not only didn't say anything, she fought so hard to protect Israel. And I'll say it because everybody's now claiming how Fatou Bensouda resisted and fought back against the Israeli blackmail. That is nonsense. She was either being bribed or blackmailed by Israel until when? She had 3 months left in office. And then she says, I'm going to investigate with Israel.
No.
They will do the same thing.
So I actually want to talk about something relevant because this is in the news right now.
Karim Khan is horrible.
So yeah, he initially was the
It's horrible.
he
This
was
is
the
Israel's
Israeli choice. And what's really interesting about that case is that not only was he the hand-selected Israeli choice, that he also actually came in with an immediate concession towards Afghanistan, towards the United States of America, refusing to prosecute certain war crimes conducted there, if I recall correctly. But Benjamin Netanyahu has been going on the American news channels and claiming that Karim Khan only chose to prosecute Israel after there were sexual assault allegations launched against him in an effort to revitalize his career, in an effort to gain favor. Do you feel like that was potentially, because it looks like it has the hallmarks of Israeli blackmail, or just blackmail in general, not just Israeli blackmail?
First of all, Karim Khan did nothing during his term, from the beginning of his term of office, in defense of Palestine and Gaza. There was now an ongoing investigation. That was what Fatou Bensouda, he launched an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
He did absolutely nothing. And then he had a problem. The problem was October 7th.
Yeah.
How do you do nothing? You acted with a blink of an eye over Putin in the Ukraine, and you were doing nothing in the case of this genocide in Gaza.
Blink of an
so he had
eye.
to do something
Yeah.
to save face. Now remember, you have to laugh. He indicted 3 members of Hamas and 2 Israelis.
Yeah.
3 members of Hamas and 2 Israelis. Would you mind showing me the numbers? About maybe 50,000 killed at that point.
Yeah.
50,000 killed versus 1,000 killed. And there are 3 indictments against Hamas and 2 against Israel. So,
Like, remember, one of your big issues is like your international, courts in general are here to provide relief after a thing has happened. We're not generally relying on courts to, stop an ongoing situation. That's just not the job of, that's just not what courts do. It's just not what courts do. That's for executive agencies to do, for presidents or police to do.
he had to do something. And then he was punished for doing something. The funny thing is, obviously we can go down 1,000 byways because there's so much to say. So who's leading the charge against Karim Khan? Ken Roth, the former head of the Human Rights Watch.
Yeah,
He says
yeah.
Khan did terrible things and blah, 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 blah. Now, let me tell you something.
They're going after Turkey as well, not the country, the other guy as well.
Or Volker Turk.
Yeah, Volker Turk,
right.
Turkey.
Ken Roth was so terrible when it came to the occupied Palestinian territories when he headed Human Rights Watch. It was known, because I suspect this will get back to him, so I'm not going to say with absolute certainty, but many people told me that the only reports he checked personally when it came to the reports produced, the only ones by Human Rights Watch, which are voluminous. I mean, they're covering the whole world.
Yeah.
They're covering the whole world. The only reports he checked personally were the ones on Israel-Palestine. And he always, see, what happens is a human rights report has effectively 2 aspects. One, the facts. You send out investigators, competent people, they try to assemble the facts. In general, the human rights reports are good on the facts. Professional people take their calling seriously, recognize they're being watched. So
Oh, this is interesting. He has the same take as I do. The facts generally are good. The legal conclusions sometimes will be fucking crazy.
they better get it right because free media, they're going to be exposed. In general, the facts are done well. Problem is the legal interpretation
Interesting,
of the
huh?
facts. Are you going to call this a violation of international law? Are you going to call this a war crime? Are you going to
It's especially interesting because he seems so weak on the international law part with the very little that we spoke about in our conversation.
call this a crime against humanity? There are many gradations. And then the question is the law, how it's interpreted. And Ken Roth systematically watered down the legal allegations against Israel. So now he's attacking Karim Khan. He was better when he headed Human Rights Watch. From what I read, and I have not read the actual legal documents, what the investigative committee did, what the judges decided, Roth makes a credible case, I believe, but I've not read it. He makes a credible case that the investigative body didn't do its job. What the investigative body did, according to him, was they said, Khan said this, the woman said that, Khan said this, the woman said that, but they don't assess the evidence. They don't say, well, Khan said it's not really credible, which he said is credible. They didn't do that. And he said that was part of their job description. They're supposed to also assess the value. I don't know.
Well, it was dismissed initially.
Wait.
I thought.
I listen closely to Francesca Albanese because I trust her.
Yeah.
I think she both is a woman and concerned with women's issues, and she's also cares about International Criminal Court and the prosecution of crimes. She said there are two separate issues. One, what happened with the women? With the women, was it true? Some say women's or four. But what happened with the women? He says it has to be seriously investigated. We can't dismiss that question. It has to be seriously investigated. Then she says there's a second issue, namely the dismissal of Karim Khan. I'll tell you the truth. The ICC is so corrupt that I don't much care who's the chief prosecutor. Luis Moreno Ocampo, who was their first chief prosecutor, total crook. Batu Bensouda, a total crook. Karim Khan, fool of the West. I remember
Hates
a very
them all.
distinguished. I have to always be careful about not dragging people in. A very distinguished international lawyer, top notch, top of mind. He said to me probably twice, the ICC, it's not a court. You know what they used to call the ICC? It's technically, for your listeners, the International Criminal Court, but it used to be called the International Caucasian Court. It only prosecuted Africans.
Well, Lindsey Graham openly admitted that when he said you're not supposed to prosecute white people, you're not supposed to prosecute Western countries.
What do you think Norm's stance on Ukraine is? I think he does the anti-NATO shit. I feel like I've heard him talk about it before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do I much care whether Karim Khan, the whole thing is a joke, the whole ICC.
Yeah.
No, I agree with Francesca Albanese. She's correct in my opinion. She says there are a lot of good people working inside.
Yeah.
That's true. And when Batu Bensouda was handling the Mahdi Marmara case, it was a civil war inside the court. 3 times, not once, twice, three times she declared the case closed. She said, I don't want to discuss this Mahdi Marmara. She said, it's trivial, it's not important, I don't want to discuss it. 3 times she declared it closed. The court said, you have to open it. Reconsider it. Closed again, have to reconsider it. And then the 3rd time she got away with it. There were people inside the court fighting her. So I'm not going to doubt that there are good people inside the ICC. But the end product is International Caucasian Court, with the one exception of Putin.
So, can I? Do you think that with the current dismantling, the deliberate dismantling, and these sanctions that ICC prosecutors are receiving, do you feel like there is an opportunity for backlash from at least some European nations? I mean, they're vassalized entirely, as we've seen over and over again. But do you feel like there's any backlash here that could potentially force the court to appoint a competent prosecutor, or you think it's completely done?
Whether it's because of Trump, singularly because of Trump, I don't want to say because I'm not sure. But one thing we can say for certain, and that is the international system right now is in crisis. Now, it's easy to say something like that because it grabs headlines, but I think a sober judgment has to be it's in crisis. So let me give you some examples which will be familiar to your listeners, and not always familiar. Let's take the 2 most recent examples. The whole system is now in crisis. You could say maybe it's in transition, or it's on the verge of collapse. Let's take 2 examples.
Okay.
On November 17th, 2025, the UN Security Council passes a resolution on Gaza. And what does the resolution do? It'll shock your listeners.
Nothing.
The UN Security Council.
Oh, a UN Security Council resolution, I think, is supposed to be binding, such that if it's a UN Security Council resolution and it's not followed through on, I think that nations might gain the international justification for military action or sanctions or something else. Although that might have to be clarified in the resolution itself. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
After the people of Gaza, having lived since 1948 in what outside observers describe as a concentration camp, and then since October 7th, had to endure a genocide, which is still ongoing. On November 17, 2025, the UN Security Council proceeded to give the deed of Gaza to that retarded ape in the White House, Donald J. Trump. They gave him the deed to Gaza. I mean, it's just, when you read that, once again, I'm walking the streets. What just happened here? He got the deed to Gaza. Do you know, according to their setup, Donald Trump has veto power over any decision that's made on what's called the Board of Peace.
Yeah.
And the UN Security Council, what's the only thing it demanded? The only demand it made, it said, here, Gaza is yours. Every 6 months, it says, the Security Council, the Board of Peace, which Trump presides over, it doesn't say it must, it should send the Security Council an update on what's happening in Gaza. The entire legal framework for resolving the Israel-Palestine conflict, which had been constructed, you could say as far back as 1948, but certainly as far back as since 1967, it was completely whited out. Completely whited out. If you ever look at UN resolutions, and I can tell you, probably not interested, but if you are, a typical UN resolution begins with what are called the preambular paragraphs. And the preambular paragraphs spell out the legal framework for resolving this conflict. The UN Security Council resolutions, the International Court of Justice, advisory opinions. It usually runs to, believe it or not, because the conflict is so old, it goes back to 1948.
Yeah. Where the fuck was this guy at in our debate? Well, this guy seems like he seems, regardless of how dog shit his books are in our conversation, at least he understands basic Like he knows how to a UN resolution is written. I imagine he knows there's been a UN General Assembly resolution and a Security Council resolution. And like, where the fuck was this guy at? Coward.
It runs to like 7 or 8 pages of laying out all the decisions, all the resolutions, all the opinions on this conflict. You know what happened in this new UN resolution? Nothing. All the entire legal framework was whited out. Okay? That to me was the end of the UN. The UN as a, let's call it the political organs of the UN, of which the highest is the Security Council. It was the end. As I said in the last line of the book, the UN Security Council, the UN system has become a rotting corpse after November 17th, 2025.
Yeah, you compared it to the Berlin conference, handing the Congo to Belgium's King Leopold II.
I mean, do you remember when Trump said that I'm going to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Mediterranean? You remember? And everyone laughed. And he got away with it.
Yeah.
They gave him the deed to Gaza. And then the second event, there has been no case of a clear, brazen, flagrant aggression and breach of the UN Charter compared to what Israel and the U.S. did when it launched on February 28th, the attack on Iran.
True.
Now,
well, I
okay,
mean, any surprise war or whatever.
Just commit aggression. But you know what? There's been no UN resolutions, no UN condemnation. Everyone
Well, there can't be a Security Council one because the U.S. is on the Security Council, so that would never happen, right?
goes on as if
There was an attempt to condemn Iran for, I guess, asking for it.
everybody carries on as if, oh, we have a war.
Yeah.
But wait, how did it start? You know, in a modern world, it's very tough to carry out aggressions without at least making the pretense of self-defense. The pretense of self-defense. As I often like to point out, even when Hitler attacked Poland in 1939, he fabricated a border incident with Poland because he just can't do that until Israel and the U.S. did that. Was there any outrage? Was there any condemnation of this brazen, flagrant breach of the UN Charter? So the system, in my opinion, the international institutions are losing even a pretense of legitimacy at this point. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, just to be fair about it, it has not been terrible.
Well, I was going to ask you about your opinion on the Vice President of the ICJ, Julia Sibatinde.
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Yeah.
In general, not bad. I was surprised. When I'm wrong, I never have a problem with saying I'm wrong. I didn't think there was a snowball's chance in hell that the ICJ would find that Israel was plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. I went through the numbers. Britain, France, the U.S. I figured Russia won't say anything because of Ukraine. And China.
Now again, okay, so never mind. Maybe this is a thing he hasn't updated his opinion on, but the plausibility was the plausibility was just seeing if it's a question of standing, right? So it's the same thing as saying like plausibly I did revenge porn of Pixie or whatever because the allegation that she's making, it meets the written standard, the prima facie standard of are the parties involved, are the parties involved relevant in this, and then is the crime that's being alleged, if the actions are true, would it qualify or satisfy this particular crime or whatever is what, yeah.
These won't say anything because there are claims made about genocide against the Uyghurs. So I figured nobody's going to open up this can of worms. It's never going to. I was totally wrong. I was completely wrong. The vote was 15-2, saying Israel was plausibly committing genocide. Not good record. The same person who said the ICC is not a court. Joke. He had high expectations for the ICJ. I couldn't figure the life of me why he had them. And I will say, without revealing any more information, that he was part of the proceedings at the ICJ during the genocide case. And he was right, and I was wrong. But there are 2 exceptions. So let me get to those 2 exceptions. The president of the court, very surprising, was an American, Joan Donahue. She went along with the majority. If you asked me to predict that, there was no way in my mind the president of the ICJ, hailing from the U.S., was going to say that Israel was plausibly committing genocide. But then what happened? Her term of office came to an end. You know what she did? She went on the BBC British broadcasting program called Hard Talk. And you know what she did in the program? She said,
oh, he's so fucking mad. I wonder if he's only seen this, if he's only familiar with this because I called him out on his incorrect interpretation of what plausibility meant. And now he's going to complain that she went on and corrected what the plausibility standard was or whatever.
And you know what she did in the program? She said, we didn't find that Israel was plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. It was such a despicable, disgusting, shameful, and shameless lie. But as you can see now this pattern. The pattern is...
That's not... So we've watched this on stream before. He just doesn't understand what plausibility means here in law. The plausibility standard is just like, are the parties relevant to this? Do they satisfy some particular arrangement or treaty or whatever? And then are the crimes alleged in violation of said treaty that the parties could conceivably be a part of? And if yes, then the plausibility standard has been met, and then you can proceed. But this isn't like evidentiary. There's not like a statement made on the strength of the case whatsoever. But okay.
The people, when they have 3 months left in office, they suddenly say things that they didn't say for 7 years. She had left the court.
Would it be fair to say, and I'm no lawyer, and many people watching and listening will not be lawyers, but would it be fair to say that the key point that you made your initial order and ruling upon was whether or not there was a plausible case that should be taken on by the court of genocide in the case of Israel's actions in Gaza after October 7, and you quite clearly decided that there was a plausible case? Is it right to say that's at the heart of what you decided?
You know, I'm glad I have a chance to address that because the court...
the ICJ has fucking failed miserably in communicating fucking anything about how they rule or what they do. There was an even worse ruling that came out months later where two of the judges didn't even know what the fuck was going on. And they wrote as much in their... I think it was either concurrences or dissents, but they wrote, they're like, I don't even know what the fuck this ruling means. Because there was a ruling about how, basically the ruling was, Israel, right now, in Gaza, insofar as they may be committing a genocide, absolutely today needs to stop all military action that is contributing to a genocide, if it's happening. And I think two of the judges wrote, like in their opinions at the end, they're like, I don't know what the fuck this means. Like, are we saying that it is a genocide and Israel needs to stop? Or are we saying if there's a genocide, Israel needs to stop? And because the ruling is basically just the court reaffirming that if you're doing a genocide, don't do it. But a lot of people in the media quoted this ruling as like, they're saying that they are doing a genocide and it needs to stop right now. I was like, well, that's not really what they were saying. But even the judges were expressing confusion over like, what the fuck are we doing here? It's ridiculous.
I did.
You know, I'm glad I have a chance to address that because the court's test for deciding whether to impose measures uses the idea of plausibility, but the test is the plausibility of the rights that are asserted by the applicant, in this case, South Africa. So the court decided that the Palestinians had a plausible right to be protected from genocide and that South Africa had the right to present that claim in the court.
Like, she's not even clarifying well what she means when she says plausibility, because that's what is the confusing word. Because plausibility, when something is plausible in an ordinary common parlance sense, plausible to me sounds like you're talking about the likelihood of something happening, not is it possible, right? It sounds like you're saying, oh, it's plausible they did that. It sounds like, oh, okay, it's kind of likely, right? No. Plausibility is just, did you meet a certain threshold or requirement to qualify for a thing? That's it. Ugh.
It then looked at the facts as well, but it did not decide, and this is something where I'm correcting what's often said in the media, it didn't decide that the claim of genocide was plausible. It did emphasize in the order...
Give an example of something not plausible. So something not plausible might be South Africa files a case saying that the penguins in Antarctica are being genocided by the United States of America. Well, this would be not plausible. Penguins aren't a party to any genocide convention. That genocide doesn't qualify, doesn't count when it's against penguins. So that would it wouldn't be plausible there. It wouldn't satisfy the elements of the whatever the legal treaty on the crimes of genocide prevention and blah blah blah.
That there was a risk of irreparable harm to the Palestinian right to be protected from genocide. But the shorthand that often appears,
like,
which
you're
is that
so
there's a
in the
plausible
legalese,
case of
even that explanation was so in the legalese, like, Jesus Christ.
genocide isn't what the court decided.
But you know what? They suddenly say things that they didn't say for 7 years. She had left the court. But you know what? Now that her term of office was over, she needed a job. Oh. And she knew there was only one way she can get a job, which was to remove the stain of having gone along with the majority. When she was on the court, she feels the pressure. You don't want to be the only dissenting vote.
It sounds like she agrees with you. Well, no, yeah, she does. But I'm saying she, like, with me giving, like, a further elaboration on what she means, I'm just saying that I don't think a normal person would listen to what she's saying there and have any idea, so it is plausible or it's not plausible? Or what do you mean when you say it's plausible that the rights of the Palestinians to not be genocided, it's plausible that their rights could be violated, but you're not saying it's plausible that a genocide is happening? Like, that, to most people, that doesn't, I don't know if that, like, makes sense. It doesn't, I don't know, it sounds kind of wacky to me. Like, if I wasn't thinking about it from a legal perspective.
You're just a lackey American, is where she hails from, the U.S. But the moment she left and she was in search of work, she completely betrayed what the court said she lied. And then there's the case of Judge Julia Sabatindi, who she hails from Uganda. And she does the same function, by the way. She serves the same function as Fatou Bensouda. So just for your viewers' sake, because they may get confused with all the names. Fatou Bensouda, he hailed from the Gambia.
Yeah.
African woman. So she has full intersectional oppression. Well, she has 3 oppressions. She's black, African, and a woman. So she has 3 oppressions, which means you can't criticize. And that's why ICC chose her. Why? Because it had become a laughingstock. They were calling it the International Caucasian Court. So they needed a black woman from Africa to prosecute African leaders, which she did with a real vigor. Judge Sabatindi, the same thing. You can't criticize her because she's the first African black woman sitting on the ICJ. No, she's beyond a horror show.
Well, she's also insane. Like, I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, it was something who also recently talked about, or not recently, but talked about how it was God's given right that I believe she's an evangelical.
Yes.
So
You never know how much of that is conviction and how much of that is business. I'm not so sure where her evangelicalism comes from. I don't know. I admit that. I don't know. But what I do know is what she was saying in the court was completely out of space, out of limits. Now, some people say...
Can I give some details from her book here?
Yeah, I want to just mention that I devote in the book, because I'm determined she's going to get removed from the court.
Yeah.
And I devoted 100 pages to exposing her. I want to just say, and then you'll read, I want to make a comment here. It's an interesting, on a human level, it's an interesting observation, I believe. So, to get back to where we were a long time ago, when his biographers were trying to make sense of Nat Turner, they said of him, Nat Turner was an extremely smart guy. Nobody disputed that. Whites, blacks, Nats, race, and when one of his biographers, Stephen Oakes, he tries to make sense why Nat Turner did what he did, he said, inside Nat Turner, there was this huge chasm between what he aspired to be as a human being and what he was destined to be in his only earthly existence. A slave. Why do I mention that? I know it sounds like, what does that have to do with Judge Sabatindi? I mention it for this reason. When I started to do the research on Judge Sabatindi, it was clear to my eye that parts of what she was saying was plagiarized. I could tell it was not her. So I went on my social media. I asked my webmaster to go on my social media and to ask people, because I don't know anything about the web. I don't know how you do research. I don't know search engine stuff. They lead me. Would people volunteer to do some research for me on the plagiarism case? And
Damn. When judges disagree with us, he's got the Trump mindset. We got to figure out who the fuck this person is.
A large number of people volunteered of quite impressive capacities as far as I know. And one person sent me 6 examples of plagiarism. One person sent me 4 examples. One person sent me 8 examples. And then amidst all of these emails, I get one from a person from Gaza. A young man from Gaza. And you know what he found? 36. Okay. And when I read that, it reminded me of Nat Turner. All of the potential and possibility of these young people in Gaza, all squandered and wasted. The huge chasm that separated what they could be, what they could do with their lives, in juxtaposition to having been born into, languishing in, and destined to die in this God-forsaken concentration camp. So I couldn't use his name in the book because then I knew he would never be able to come to the United States. So I didn't want to mention it. But he came up with 35 pages of clear plagiarism by Judge Sabatindi, which is just plagiarizing these propaganda tracts by Israeli so-called legal scholars, and also just outright propagandists.
Yeah. Wow. You also, I mean, some of the revelations are actually pretty insane. My community is very familiar with some of these sources, but yes, there was a lot of pro-Israel sources, but also PragerU videos and Wikipedia. And of course, my audience is very familiar with PragerU. We've covered some of the ridiculous things that Dave said.
He plagiarized Wikipedia and included the hyperlink.
Yeah, it's
hey,
pretty
sounds
insane.
like the person in my court case.
What do you think it says about the ICJ that she hasn't been summarily removed?
Well, because first, African woman, black African. Yes, it's true.
I don't think
you can't.
identity politics.
No, it does.
I don't think he's. Well, I think Finkelstein is I think I already said this. I think he's very, very, very anti-IDPOL. Like Finkelstein is not on board with any identity politics shit at all. Like, and he's an old guy, so he comes from a time when you can just openly be against all that shit. Nobody really cares that much. I don't know if Hasan was quite ready for that.
It's the same concept as blood libel, which is a real instance of anti-Semitism, blaming Jews for poisoning the well.
Children in Gaza.
But then, yes, attributing that to something that we can visualize, something that we can see with our own 2 eyes, like Israel killing children in Gaza, is unbelievably harmful if you care about combating anti-Semitism.
It's not only harmful to combating anti-Semitism. See, the problem in my view is any definition you come across of anti-Semitism, if you were to open up a Webster's, or open up an Oxford English Dictionary and OED definition, they always insert the word irrational, an irrational hatred of Jews, an irrational belief that Jews are this, that Jews are that. Here's the problem. What if a lot of the resentment is rational? What if a state, calling itself the state of the Jewish people, what if your resentment at the genocide it's perpetrating, what if it's rational? What if Jews are carrying on in a flagrant, brazen fashion to suppress our right to freedom of speech and using their considerable financial power to do so? If you resent Jews for that, is it anti-Semitism? But it's rational. It's rational to resent people using their financial wealth to crush dissent, to threaten students with suspension, to threaten them with expulsion, in some cases, to threaten them with deportation. In some cases, the students are being absconded with and sent into places God only knows where.
Do you think this is anti-Semitic rhetoric? No. He's just explaining how sometimes, stereotypes maybe exist for good reason, you know? It's only anti-Semitic if it's irrational, not if it's true.
When those things were happening, did Bill Ackman say anything? Did he denounce it? Did he say it was wrong what was done to Mohammed Khalil? No, he did not. So, or when Sheryl Sandberg abets the genocide by coming out with this fake film of a Hamas rape called Screams Without Silence, if you resent the power that Jews use, is it anti-Semitism? I can't see that it is, because of the problem that every definition incorporates some notion that it's irrational. There's nothing irrational about that resentment. And you say it's harder to fight anti-Semitism. I think the problem is even bigger. The problem is it even anti-Semitism? When an ethnic group uses its financial and its political clout in order to further a Jewish supremacist agenda, is that anti-Semitism? I don't think it is.
So here's where you and I differ on this issue. I am reminded, and I used to use this all the time, of the March 1919 speech that Lenin delivered on anti-Semitic
my
pogroms.
God.
And I think this is something that you will agree with me on as well, which is that the socialist, communist, Marxist interpretation revolves around class struggle, and that the obvious scapegoat, the scapegoating of any kind of ethnic minority, in this circumstance being Jews, is a very commonly deployed trope, a commonly deployed tactic, and that no group of people are monolithic. And I think you also agree with me on that as well. And that my understanding always has been, or the way that I talk about these issues always is revolved around the notion that if organized Jewry was this monolithic force, in the way that many Jewish Zionist Americans in key positions of power try to present it as, utilizing the vague interpretation of Zionism, or even saying Israel's a Jewish state, Israel has to remain a Jewish state, Israel has demographic concerns. Why should we care about that? We don't care about that with any other country. As a matter of fact, when Nick Fuentes says we have demographic concerns, or when Tucker Carlson says we have demographic concerns here in America, we understand that as white supremacy. We understand that as white nationalism, and we find it abhorrent.
Totally agree.
Jewry is a term, or maybe he's reading something or got talking about somebody. Jewry is I think, a fairly common way to describe like Jewish stuff or the Jewish communities, but it's an older term. We don't really use that anymore. But if you read old books or history books related to Israel Palestine, you'll see like global Jewry or whatever fairly commonly. It's not like a super out there term. I mean, we just don't use it today, so I don't know where Hasan picked that up.
So why is there this distinction? The way I approach this issue is, if there was this monolithic understanding, there would not be such a gigantic generational divide, and there would be billions of dollars invested in ensuring that young American Jews, young Jews in Europe, are indoctrinated into this false understanding, this false notion
listen,
that, you know.
Hasan. Of course, what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
I have a credo. It's my own little credo. Never quarrel with facts. What you're saying is true.
But,
okay? And we have to start with that.
Yeah.
The problem is this. If there's a significant number of people carrying on in this way, is it really irrational? And as I said, a part of a core,
that part I don't disagree with
core
you.
definition of anti-Semitism that's supposed to be irrational.
Jewry is very outdated and has a negative connotation. Sure, yeah, but I would consider it like, if you're reading an older text, you might see like somebody talking about like the Negro, and it's not necessarily used in a derogatory context. Or the sometimes for the Middle East, you'll see terms like the Near East, or I think maybe the Orient might have even been used to describe like east of Iraq. Like I think Iran and Pakistan might have been described as like part of the Orient. But now like saying Oriental today is like very not okay. But yeah, we still use Near East in Polish. That's just because you guys don't want to be thought of as Eastern anything. So you have to. I'm just kidding.
Is it really irrational if people make a leap and say the way Jews are carrying on?
Sorry if you've answered this before, but do you think Norm genuinely dislikes you, or was he told to be antagonistic to you in your debate with him? I think that Norm is like more than anything, more than a pop historian, more than a Jew, more than a whatever. I think he's a character. No, I'm sorry. When I say a character, I mean like I think he has a big personality, and I feel like he brought that with him. Like I don't know if this was like particular like propaganda strategy that he wanted to use against me. I think he just has a big personality, and he'll act in a certain way in service to that big personality. I feel like I don't know if I'm over-indexing it, but I really do feel like in our debate, I think for the only time he ever respected me and let me speak in a debate, maybe just because he was getting tired or whatever, was at some point I was talking to Muin Rabbani, and this was like after the third break or whatever, and I was just like done with it. Was he tried to cut me off again, and I put my hand up, and I was like, excuse me, like he was doing to me. It was the only time I think he'd ever stopped trying to cut me off in the conversation. I don't know if there was like some perverted sense of mutual respect or whatever, or that, I don't know, I thought it was funny. But I mean, like he has a big character. So yeah, and again, I feel like he has like a lot of personal grudges. Like I don't know his like autobiography that well, but I wonder his like hatred for wokeness and his hatred for like colleges and everything. I think to some extent is borne out in like this personal feud that he had with Dershowitz and other people at the college that he was trying to get tenure from, that he lost because he was, I'll say eccentric, probably an asshole, which he is. But I mean, that might drive a lot of his feelings about like cancel culture and wokeness and everything as well. Like it's the kind of person he is, you know, for better or for worse.
It's completely outrageous. Does that really shock the conscience when people reach that conclusion? Israel calls itself the state of the Jewish people. So is it so shocking if people conclude that when Israel carries on this way, it's acting...
And its defenders say that...
So then the question is it so shocking for people to be Islamophobic when so many Muslims that commit terrorist attacks say they're doing it in the name of Islam, right? But you could never use this other reasoning. Although Finkelstein might actually not challenge you. They might say, yeah, sure. I'm not as sure on that.
You're doing this at the behest of Judaism.
At the behest of the Jewish people? Is that such a shocking conclusion?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. And I don't really, at some level, I don't really
To be fair, Alan Dershowitz is also a bad guy. Well, I know he's got obnoxious political positions. I don't know about him interpersonally, but Finkelstein interpersonally is like fucking intolerable. And he probably was when he was doing his college shit as well. Can I kill this big worm with just a submachine gun, or do I have to build fucking rockets on this dumbass fucking planet?
With people who reach the wrong conclusion. I'm going to say, okay, my parents passed through the Nazi Holocaust. They lost on both sides of both sides, my mother and father, they lost every single member. To their dying day, they hated every German. Every German. Okay? Did I like that? Not really. Did they ever quarrel with them about it? Never. Did they ever argue with them about that? Never. I understood from their experience. I remember I once asked my mother the question. I was curious. I said,
bunch
did you
of
ever meet
50
a German
turrets?
during the extermination who showed some sympathy? She thought very hard. And then she said, I remember once a German soldier, he had a look on his face of feeling a little guilty. She said, I remember one. So is it so shocking that she generalized from her experience and hated all Germans? I don't find that particularly shocking. And given what she endured, there was no way on God's earth that I would dare to quarrel with that experience. Did I
can't
think it
build
was
tanks
wrong?
there,
Yes.
guys.
Do I have German friends? Yes. But will I argue? No. And in the same way, will I argue with a Palestinian or a Gazan who hates all Jews? Never. I would never argue with it.
Could we get a taste of 1x for a moment? Sure. I legitimately believe that his talking speed is slow enough that it should be considered disrespectful. He either needs to bring a translator or something else, and it's actually intolerable.
That's their experience. I will now not, which is totally out of character for me, I will not talk to an Israeli. You crossed the red line. You've gone too far. I've read too many human rights reports. You have targeted, Targeted. You have targeted too many Gazan children. You have targeted too many in their head. You have targeted too many in their chest. You have targeted too many toddlers. Now you say, well, that's generalizing. That's not every Israeli. Well, it's not really, is it not? I've read the polls. The polls show that these polls are taken like every 2 weeks since the Gaza genocide. And you know what the poll showed?
80% support.
5% of the Israeli Jews thought Israel was using too much force. 95% said either sufficient force or not enough force. Of those 95%, 40% said not enough force. I can go through many, many polls. Israel, to its no, I wouldn't say honor, but it has a citizen army. I think the citizen army is a correct concept. Everybody should have to pay that ultimate price to defend their country. An army should not be composed of the poor or those who have no futures. So they say, you benefit from the independence of your country. Everybody should have to serve to defend the country up to and including the ultimate sacrifice. Okay? But then there's a problem. You have a citizen army. You know what the citizen army means? It's representative of the population. Now, if that citizen army is committing genocide, it's also representative of the population.
This is what I mean when I say like functional anti-Semitism. Like you've justified. I mean, he's justified the eradication of the entire country of Israel. And this is also the thing that like people that are working in media will never push us on or anybody else on. It's like, what do you think is like when you hear stuff like this, do you really think the solution that these people have in mind is just we just need to stop funding them and we'll be okay? Like, really?
It's not an unfair generalization to say this is a nation of child killers.
You were talking about the Middle East and our language, and at Destiny is being a fucking retard, thinking that we don't consider ourselves Eastern European. I'm sorry, I was watching too much Hasan, so the anti-Polishness took over my body. I love you and I respect you, okay? I lived in Warsaw for 3 months. I had a good time over there.
Say this is a nation of child murderers. That's a fact. So then you say, well, but the number who actually target children, yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's terrible. The most recent...
No, it's a complicity.
Do you think they want the U.S. to attack Israel? Yes. Or some type of international coalition, or just support or champion other actors in the region attacking Israel until the Jewish majority state is destroyed? Yes.
The most recent UN Commission's inquiry report on assaults on children, they targeted an orphanage, But, okay, you say that's still a handful. But here's a question. It was being reported already in mid 2024. It was already being reported. Israel's using starvation as a method of war in Gaza.
Fuck is
Everybody
the-
agreed on that. The EU foreign policy
guy.
chief, Gutierrez, everybody agreed. Israel's using starvation as a method of war. Okay? Now, it's not easy to use starvation as a method of war. You have to seal all their points of entry. You have to blow up food banks in Gaza in order to make that work. The whole Israeli army was implicated. And you know what? You know who you're trying to starve? 1.1 million of those 2.3 million Gazans are children.
Yeah.
You are concretely implicated, or to use your word, complicitous in starving children. Okay, guys, you lost me.
Do you have to have
Did I meet
power
somebody in the
for them
street?
to come and kill
Or
the
at beach,
thing?
or
What the
somebody
fuck?
on the beach, and the person says, I'm from Gaza. Excuse me, I'm from Israel. I walk away. Won't talk. You lost me. So, to get back to your original question.
I'm a little bit too woke for this, and only because it's interesting. I had a very similar, well, not on this issue, but
I'm not proud of, I'm not happy with what I'm saying. On the other hand, I think a line has been crossed. Because I said to you earlier.
there are things that I agree with what you said. I'm just saying that I have a more optimistic perspective in terms of changing people's minds.
I said to you earlier, there are a couple of misconceptions about Gaza. And I said one of them is it's a war. And I said there was a second. And I said my mind slipped, but I know it'll come back to me. The second misconception is, as you know, even people like Bernie Sanders, who I like, just like I like Brad Landler, I don't have the litmus test. So they are you a Zionist? Are you now, or have you ever been a Zionist? I'm not too caught up on the litmus test. I want to see a general picture. And in general, Bernie was horrible the first month, horrible the second month, but then he turned around. Whether it was public, whether it was because he saw public opinion, he wasn't that afterwards, except for one thing, which I'm going to get to now, and which will probably is why you're expressing reservations. And that was the question of who's the problem.
Netanyahu.
And it's not Netanyahu.
No, it's not. I know. I'm just.
Yes, I understand.
all the
We're on
Israelis.
the same wavelength. It's not Netanyahu. As I've said over and over again, the problem is not the Israeli state. The problem is the Israeli society. Those folks have gone mad. They are psychotic in their relish at the death and destruction in Gaza. The problem is Israeli society. So you may say you're
Do I have to
woke,
hit the head to do damage?
so
or-
you're against these generalizations.
No. I just
But
meant, I believe
Israel
I believe
calls
you still change someone's mind.
Israel calls itself the state of the Jewish people. And the problem is the Jewish
Oh, there's no
people
way.
of Israel
Bruh,
are
fuck
mad.
man.
The kinds of relish they express at the death and destruction in Gaza. To me, I have to tell you. I've said
Do we know
this,
how unhinged Hasan's chat was during all of this? I imagine it was probably crazy unhinged.
and maybe it's an idiosyncrasy of mine. There was a great historian once. His name was Arnold Toynbee. Okay, and he once wrote this History of Humanity. I guess he got for like 15 volumes, and then he passed. And when he came to discuss Israel and Zionism, he said that the Zionists have created a new Jewish psychophysical type. The Israeli Jews are not Jews. I know that will come as kind of paradoxical.
No,
but they're
I
not Jews.
understand what
When
you're
I was growing
Yeah,
up,
for
you know what
sure.
a Jew was somebody who was smart, read a lot, was creative, culturally creative, and physically kind of feeble. There were a few Jewish sports heroes like Hank Greenberg. Again, the names will come back.
Adam Friedman.
No, a few, but in general, Jews were seen as being kind of scrawny, physically feeble, and so you think of a Jew, Franz Kafka, with the big ears, the high forehead. The classic one of my generation was, of course, Woody Allen. He was nerdy, very creative. Played an instrument. He acted. He was a writer, a comedian, a director. That was a Jew for us. The Israeli type is totally alien to what it was in my generation to be a Jew. So I don't even consider it. I mean, if Israel called itself, believe me, if you want to solve the problem of anti-Semitism in the world, 95, not the full part, because Jews do exercise disproportionate power, wealth, and so forth, and that will always be a problem for Jews. But 95% of the problem would be eliminated if Israel just called itself the state of the Nazi people. It'll be over. Just drop the Jewish part. And a large
I
part.
don't disagree with you. That's why my criticism is entirely around the identity on Zionism, which is why I talk about the distinction, regardless of how people perceive it.
Damn.
There is, there's very stubborn. There's a very stubborn retort towards that to say, no, Zionism means something different to me, and this attitude I think is carried by a lot of American Jews.
I don't care very much what it means to you. You can.
No, I'm not saying it means to me.
Right, but I
I'm
mean,
saying-
they can say whatever it means
Yeah.
to them. I just want you to take a stand on one question. Do you believe that Jews as Jews should have superior rights to non-Jews in the state of Israel, for that matter, anywhere else? And then you say Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. Fine. I don't really agree with that, but if that's what you believe, that's fine. It doesn't, for me, that's an ideological question. It's not a political question. You can believe whatever you want. But on the practical political question, do you think there should be a state which privileges one ethnic group over another? And that to me is the way Mamdani handled it, and I thought it was correct. It was very well done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Let's see. So I wanted to talk to you, and thank you. This has been 3 hours now that we've been talking. I know you brought up, I think you said you had a conversation with Candace Owens for
4
also.
hours and 45
Okay, well, we passed that point.
Candace Owens, I'll tell you one thing I was impressed by.
You were impressed by Candace Owens?
She has absolutely limitless energy.
Okay.
Do you know when we got off the interview, she was still after me about Freud and what a pervert he was and how and a child molester.
So
I was very impressed by her reserves of sheer physical energy.
Yeah. So you sat down with Candace Owens, you discussed your books. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, I don't know if you saw this, but she was waving around the copy of The Talmudic Jew.
How would you answer that Finkelstein question? Every country favors their different ethnic groups. Every single country controls its immigration policy. It's just very few other countries are faced with such a demographic threat. It's just not really a question. I don't know if I'm sure there are some in Africa, or maybe that I'm just not aware of because I don't know fuck all about Africa. But the country of Israel is really the only one that's like a mainstream spoken about country today that has like such a demographic threat. So of course they have a unique interest in the relationship that they have with their like ethnic majority, but no other country has that question. If there were 50 million people trying to immigrate into any European country, they would enact the exact same types of restrictive immigration policies, but they don't have to do that. So we don't think about it and talk about it. And we pretend that in our countries, we would never favor one ethnicity over another, even though in the U.S. we literally do have caps on how many people can come from a certain country or whatever. We do this, but...
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.